Yeah, and then today, Mike got caught in that. I was at the police. I drove my friend to the airport and I went to the police meeting and.
Tate.
Yeah, it was like, he's like,
You,
where are you? I said,
you just cooked and like helped yesterday, like so much. It's amazing. Thanks.
It's about drowned, but he made it.
Yeah. Pancakes, cake.
All the things.
It's great.
All the things.
Finley loved eating pancakes in the middle of Baker Street. I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, people love it. Isn't it?
It's fun.
The original patio.
The original.
Why am I not getting any of these messages? Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I see that. I was like, I'm getting these messages and they don't make, I got one was like, traffic is light. And I can't figure out what that's pertaining to. Anyhow, well, welcome everybody to Tuesday, July 2nd. Looks like we've survived Canada Day. Now into year 157. And I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Syilx, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Councillors, are there any?
I'm sorry. I don't know why when I turn down the sound of my phone. I will get that technology one day. My apologies.
It's okay.
To the
Councillors, any introduction of late items? Okay. If I could have an adoption of the agenda as circulated then. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor, and that carries. Item number 5, adoption of the previous minutes. I'm sure you've all had a chance to review them. We have minutes of May the 7th and June the 4th of regular council meetings. If I could have a mover. Moved by Tate, seconded by Page. Councillors, did you see any errors or omissions or corrections that needed to take place? Seeing.
Can I just ask a question? Mm-hmm. It's not, so one of the things I was interested in was the UBCM Emergency Preparedness Grant that applied for, supported for $30,000. And it just got me thinking, is there a way for us to track those? Like, when do we find out? Are they just reported, or, I know that a lot of times we, authorize that to happen, and I don't know that we always heard back whether we are successful or unsuccessful in receiving them. So I know in other groups that I belong to, there's action items on the minutes and we follow those up and things like that, but I don't think that's part of the procedure here, and I'm just trying to better understand how I could stay on top of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I do try on the larger ones to send them out, especially if I know they're going to be more of a profile thing, but we can certainly do that. I think Chris, as part of the financial reporting on the quarterly thing, probably could list the grants we received as part of that.
Yeah, I'll try and stay up. It's tough. Sometimes they don't pay us until after the project's done, so it's not always right there where I pick up on it. So I just have to stay in contact with, if it was Nelson Fire that applied for it, them to say, hey, we were successful, or. So we'll try and kind of communicate that back when we were successful in something, because the money doesn't always come in at the beginning, right? So
yeah. I just think it's really good news to share with the community how hard all of the city departments are working to bring in money besides their tax dollars, which everyone knows we're due today. And so, I think if we share that, I like good news.
okay, no, sounds good.
Thank you. That was it. Just a process question.
Okay, so seeing no errors and omissions, council, all those in favor and opposed, and that carries. And then we're on to workshop, our workshop. And just so people know, Councilor Pinero and Councilor Lockenberg are just running a little bit late. They will be joining us, and I will try to acknowledge when they come into the room. But now we're on to a very exciting workshop and educational session, the fleet decarbonization. And it's being brought to us by I think, Graham, you're taking the lead, are you?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so Graham Visky, Senior NGS Specialist, and Jody Cayley, Fleet and Transit Manager, are going to be presenting the Fleet Decarbonization Workshop. This workshop will introduce Nelson's fleet decarbonization, the paths to emission reduction, their potential financial impacts, and review opportunities and challenges. And staff are looking to council for guidance on future budget discussions relating to fleet decarbonization. So, over to you. And Councillor Pinero has just joined us in council chambers. Welcome, Councillor Pinero.
Hey.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to present the work that we've done on the fleet decarbonization. In front of you, there are two documents. I'll review the smaller page, the agenda there, and we'll go over the larger one together throughout the workshop. So, as mentioned, the purpose is really to initiate this conversation around fleet decarbonization and its impact on the budget, and discuss certain pathways that I've highlighted and the implications of those pathways on our budget and our emissions reduction target. So I've broken this agenda into items and then key points. On the left, item 1 is a walkthrough of this briefing document. I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. Really, I want to pay attention or show you the second page, which is the appendix. The first item there is talking about all the knowns, the unknowns, the assumptions that go into the model. So this is all based off of a model that takes known information such as the utilization metrics of 62 vehicles in our fleet, 62 of the roughly 100 vehicles that we currently have. We also know the replacement schedule that Jody Cayley, the fleet manager, and the procurement manager have walked or developed, and we know other things such as the price of internal combustion engine vehicles and EV alternatives, the price of electricity and fuel, our 2023 fuel consumption. To kind of go over them briefly, there's a few things not included as well. That second section, transit vehicles are not included in this. Hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell, and biofuel blends are not included in this model or analysis. Other things not included or unknown are what extent the BC government is going to have on their regulation for fleet electrification, and we'll talk about that in the future. And some other unknowns are the EV technology. So there are some assumptions I'm making on range, price, based off of modeling, and we'll talk about kind of all these in much more detail as we go.
Next question?
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. So have you heard, is the BC government going to help municipalities? Is it like a stream of thought with the BC government that you've heard about, or like they would offer grant streams for this?
That is a great question, and it's kind of a crux to one of the pathways that we'll talk about.
Okay.
The BC government has a proposal out right now where they're going to potentially mandate local governments to a certain electrification, either stock option or purchasing requirement. There's no word, or there hasn't been an update since May 2023 last year, and as of this year, they're going to do more studies. So they've just pushed our knowledge on this to probably next year after the election. So
Okay.
no word on what the updated requirements or regulations could be, and they haven't talked about whether the support or what the support would look like for these types of regulations. So
Okay.
no.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
If I could just get a clarification on, I think it's under knowns, point 4 and 5. So the 2023 fleet vehicle fuel compensation, is that both fossil fuels and electricity for the vehicles that are currently in the fleet in 2023?
Yeah. For 2023, we only had one electric vehicle right at the end of that
Okay.
year. So
pretty
yes, we
small.
know both the
And
gas-
then the next point, when you say fuel,
Yeah.
do you mean all of the fuel, or just that's fossil fuel and the electrical fuel rates are separate from that?
Just, it's a known that we know the price that we paid for the fuel that we used So we know gasoline, diesel, and electricity.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Counselor Page.
Why are plug-in electric hybrids not included in the analysis?
That's a great question. It's more out of difficulty to model because they have varying ranges of electrical capacity, so 40 or 70, and it really depends on when they're charged as to when you're using the electricity versus the gasoline. So they could be substituted in for the electric vehicles, but just it's mentioned here they would be at a lower cost but a higher emission because eventually you'll transition from the electric engine to the internal combustion engine. So for no particular reason other than they're hard to model and not as simple as electric vehicles to model.
But am I right to assume that when we would go in and operationalize a pathway, if there was a plug-in electric and it was going to model as being used enough that it would be chargeable at the office, we would actually consider that as an option?
Yeah, and they have their benefits. The range limitations that you see in EV, which are fairly substantial to some services that we provide, wouldn't be seen in plug-in hybrids because of the 500 plus kilometers of internal combustion engine range that they have. Yeah.
Days work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also have, we have been in discussions about certain vehicles that don't have the opportunity to charge at the site. So that with a plug-in hybrid, you have the option to use fuel till you got to a plug-in site and have the time to charge.
Yeah. If you exceeded your 80 kilometers that day.
Yeah, yeah, or if just it wasn't,
Or if it wasn't set up that there was a charge point at, say, a layover vehicle that went home after work, like an on-call vehicle, doesn't have the capacity to charge at home, but they could use the fuel to get where they needed to go until they came to a facility to charge.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move past this and I'll go to...
Oh, sorry, Counselor Panero.
Hi, sorry. I apologize if this is just staring me in the face here. There's so much information. But it wasn't immediately clear to me whether, like, our strategy involves replacing our existing vehicles with EVs. Are we doing that before their end of life in some cases or in all cases? Like, are we just replacing them? Or are we waiting for them to need replacement and then replacing them on a schedule that was like on the former schedule, I guess?
Yeah, that is kind of the crux, or one of the main points behind this is we'll chat about when one scenario really is talking about, or one pathway is talking about replacing them when they're scheduled to be replaced, and the other one might mean we replace them before that. And what does that mean?
And I have a subsequent question based on that yet to be known thing. So given that, like, obviously we're trying to make a difference here, and there's obviously embodied, I don't know if this is the right term for it, but like an embodied carbon footprint involved in producing a brand new EV. And we have a bunch of cars and trucks that are already produced, that have already done that part, and they run on gas. How long do we have to run those EVs for them to overcome their own carbon footprint? And given, like, what you've talked about, just there's so many different technologies coming online all the time, and this is a fairly relatively new situation. What are the likelihood that we're going to have a bunch of obsolete EVs before they actually have been here long enough to be better performing than the cars and trucks we already have?
I'll answer the second portion of that question first. I guess it is you're right, there are evolving technologies. I think electrification of the fleet is definitely the most mature technology. So for now, we're kind of veering ourselves towards that. Luckily, we can do that incrementally. We can purchase a vehicle at a time and a charger at a time. We don't have to commit fully. That's one of the reasons why we went with the fleet electrification first as our decarbonization plan, is because we replace vehicles every year already. So might as well try this lower emission type vehicle. And that also gives the opportunity to shift when new technology comes, or if it comes. So there's that. I forget the first portion of your question, I apologize.
Just the embodied carbon
Yes.
vehicle to begin with, like how long does it take for that for us to sort of spend that capital and become, you know,
Yes.
in territory where we're actually better off than we were?
I guess being in BC and our electricity coming from hydroelectricity, our electricity is very low in emissions. So it would be, they say about 7 to 10 years, or right around the 700 or 70,000 kilometer range is when you
get
see
to
that.
zero or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay.
And it might even be sooner. That might be like a Canadian average. So BC we might be quicker than that because of our low emission electricity.
However, the cars aren't produced here, so they're probably being produced on coal.
Potentially, yeah.
Thanks.
But
So
some
just
of
to
the
be
other-
aware, just to be aware, Councillor Lockenberg has now joined the meeting. Thank you thanks. Councillor Page, you have a question?
Oh, I was just saying, so would the other cars. They'd be equal.
Yeah, we already have the other cars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you had a question there too about, are we replacing before the end of life? And
Yes.
currently, we're not.
Okay.
We're just replacing at end of life right now. But there is, Graham will extend on that throughout this presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to transition to the presentation, which you guys have items 3 in front of you in the larger piece of paper, and item 7, the 3 pathways that we'll talk about. The rest, I will try to walk you through. And I believe you've also been provided a copy of this, which might be difficult to view on smaller screens. So I'll do my darndest. Okay, so away from item 1, item 2, review Nelson Next and other local governments targets. This is the impetus of this work. Nelson Next says we're going to be net zero municipal operations by 2030. That is in 5.5 years. We have to hit zero, which is a large task. Aligning with this is also Aspiration 7. Really, we are a model city for integrated climate action and leadership, ensuring all municipal operations are low carbon and resilient. And our priority climate change actions are funded and monitored is Aspiration 7 in Nelson Next. In comparison, here are other, I'm not sure if you're able to see that. I can see it. Here are other local government's targets. We are the most ambitious in BC, second or in front of the Township of Langley, which is 100% target of municipal reductions for their fleet and facility. So we're 10 years ahead of them in our target. Alternatively, there's the City of Calgary, a 10% reduction by 2030, and others in front, and others as well. Other notables are at the bottom. The BC government for their fleet, 27 to 32%. So that'll come in again for their fleet, or for their municipal operations or local government operations, 40% by 2030. So we're more ambitious, or Nelson Next is more ambitious than all others listed.
Councillor Payne, a question.
I mean, District of Saanich is looking at 50% by 2025. Do we know what their 2030 ambition is?
It's not quite.
It's not 7. It's not
I don't think they
75.
even have a
Okay.
2030 ambition yet.
Because that seems pretty ambitious right now.
Yeah. I believe District of Saanich right now, their last reported, they were at 23% reduction as of 2 years ago. So they're potentially on track.
Thank you.
Item 3, so we scheduled this, or we have rescheduled this to kind of be front-loaded. So there's a lot here, and we will explain it all in time. And let me make sure. So this should be the first page on your handout. This is your equipment replacement reserve. What was agreed upon from 2024 to 2028 is bolded, and then 2029 to 2035 is projected. So at the top we have the open balance. That was the amount of money in the reserve from the previous year. In the middle, we have the contribution, somewhere between 900,000 to 1.4 million. At the bottom, we have capital expenditure. This is the amount we've spent on vehicles and equipment. And then further down, we have the closing balance. That's the amount we end up at the end of that year. The purple being 2024. Projecting forward, I took Jody's equipment replacement schedule, which outlines the expected age or lifespan of the vehicle, when they're going to be replaced, and what is being the amount of budget we're putting into that replacement. And I was able to project that forward to 2035. And based off of the amount we've been contributing previously, I just projected that forward, roughly around $100,000 each year. And I was able, with all that information, I was able to create this graph, which is on the bottom of your page there. You have some extra lines. Those extra lines are different scenarios. So this gray line that I'm showing now, or is at the top, is our reserve, with its balance being dipped in the early 2030s because of a push of the lifespan of our vehicle, or the expected lifespan of our vehicle. So Jody has also gone through the process of extending the lifespan of our vehicle to kind of defer some of that budget to later. And that was a request made. And that explains the dip down below $1 million in our reserve by 2031, 2032. And then it dips back up, or comes back up. The purpose behind our meeting is to talk about what potential fleet decarbonization scenarios mean. Let's unhide. So I will introduce two new lines to this graph. The green line is, and we'll discuss this in detail, is potentially a new business as usual. This is when we introduce electric vehicles into our fleet. And then the orange line is modeled around the BC Government Zero Emission Vehicle Act proposal, which there's two versions. This is the milestone version, which states that certain stocks of our light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty vehicles have to be, we have to hit those milestones by certain years. Or if you want to see the actual table, it's the bottom table on page 2 of our agenda.
I'm missing something. I've got an orange line and a purple line.
Yeah, I will change the colors.
Oh,
The colors
thank you.
default.
Okay. That's
Hold
what
on.
I'm trying to.
It's the bright graph. He's just got different colors than we have.
I don't anymore.
So,
There you go. Now we match.
no idea.
So yeah, really, the discussion or what we're bringing up today is the implications of specific or certain fleet decarbonization pathways on the budget, and what future conversations for the budget will look like if we decide to go down certain pathways of fleet decarbonization. So the orange graph is a little bit more ambitious than the curve we're on now. It introduces electric vehicles, but it also means our reserves will take a bit more of a hit, because we have to spend more to acquire those or premium on the electric vehicles. And then the purple line is potentially a BC mandated pathway, which requires us to hit certain milestones for vehicle classifications. And it dips below zero, meaning we'll have to acquire more money to offset that.
Councilor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. But that could be managed if the government was giving grants, right?
Yep,
It wouldn't be such a dip.
No word has, like we've said, no word on that from the BC government, and they're doing studies right now to determine the impact of this type of regulation. This is based off of California's own Zero Emission Vehicle Act, which is in place now.
Okay.
That's where this proposal came from. But you're right. Hopefully there would be some sort of action or support from the BC government to help us through this.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I will next go through what our emissions profile are now, and we'll talk about this again at the end. So there's an opportunity to adjust this based on the amount that we are potentially putting in. So I will move on. Item 4, Nelson's 2023 emissions profile. There are three main contributors to the amount of greenhouse gases we emit. Buildings being one, the buildings that we own use natural gas. That natural gas emits CO2. The second is our fleet. I have in parentheses there without transit, because transit's not included in our fleet, even though we are partially responsible for them. Then the third is contracted emissions. Those are the emissions that we use contractors for to service or provide these services, such as vegetation management or road resurfacing. Services that we don't do ourselves, but we pay others to do for us. And the emissions associated with each. Buildings are our highest emitter as of 2023. Fleet is second with 533 tons of CO2 in 1 year, making up 37%. So that's really what we're trying to impact with this fleet decarbonization discussion and the pathways that I'll present here shortly. And I also want to discuss briefly that I kind of already mentioned this, but vehicles are our easiest and lowest hanging fruit for fleet decarbonization because we replace so many a year. It's roughly 8 vehicles a year that are being replaced. So we have an opportunity to include these electric alternatives within our fleet every year. Whereas in buildings, if you were to replace a low efficiency boiler with a high efficiency boiler, it comes out to about the same cost over 12 years, outlined on the little table there, but we don't replace a boiler every year in our buildings. It takes about 2 to 3 years before we replace a boiler throughout all of the facilities that we own, or a heating unit, mechanical system throughout all the facilities we own. So, wanted to mention that. Moving on to item 5. This is an overview of our fleet. In this table, I'll zoom in even more. That should be visible. Wrong way. This is a breakdown of light-duty vehicles and medium and heavy-duty vehicles by department. Light-duty vehicles are SUVs, pickup trucks, side-by-sides, and light-duty equipment. Medium and heavy-duty vehicles, and I'll talk about this more later, are F-250s and above with certain towing and hauling, and everything else that's heavy, such as dump trucks, garbage trucks, fire trucks, heavy-duty equipment like excavators, plows. But by department, Public Works takes the vast majority of our vehicles, specifically the medium and heavy duty, with also the majority of light duty by department. But this becomes more important when we realize that only light duty vehicles have an EV replacement currently. So there are 0 or very few medium and heavy duty electric alternatives. Only light duty vehicles can be replaced with electric vehicles at this moment. And they make up 41% of our total fleet. Whereas medium duty also make 41% and heavy duty make 18% of our vehicles. These are on this table or graph in front of you. These are the vehicles broken up into body classifications. SUVs, pickup trucks, side-by-side, and light-duty equipment are light-duty. Bucket trucks, dump trucks, medium-duty F-250s and above, plows and special vehicles such as street sweepers are medium-duty, and then heavy-duty fire trucks, heavy-duty equipment, and waste collection trucks or garbage trucks. And further, I'll go over this quickly. Departments also have, this is a breakdown of the department vehicle classifications. So this is Public Works. It has a lot of medium-duty vehicles and heavy-duty vehicles that can't be replaced with electric alternatives, but it also has 12 light-duty vehicles that can. Compared to Nelson Hydro, where they have more than half their vehicles are light-duty. So each department kind of has a different breakdown, and will be able to electrify at a different rate. There's a key point here. This is really talking about technology change, and that'll be kind of the focus of the first bit, or more than half of this discussion. But there are 2 other types of emissions reduction method to our fleet. There are vehicle right sizing, which means just using the right vehicle for the right task, not using big vehicles to haul people, or where you can use a lower emission vehicle like a sedan to move folks. And then the third one, changing the use of the vehicle, so influencing the drivers with the behavior of the drivers, like a driver training program, which is something we're probably going to do for next year. There's a question. Nope. I will keep on going. I want to talk a bit about our fleet utilization. This is an interesting graph that indicates all of our trips, our vehicle trips for 2023 of the 62 vehicles that have GeoChad GPS monitoring. Every dot is a daily trip across a year. So the vast majority of our trips are below 100 kilometers for all of the 62 vehicles that we drive. But there are some outliers. We do see some in the 300 to 400s, and then a few trips 600 to 700. Likely trips to large metropolitan areas like Kelowna, maybe to Calgary.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you. So that's good, because that means that we can do electric vehicles, short haul driving. That's a positive graph, yeah?
It is, yeah.
For us.
Yeah. It means, and the next bit of this will hopefully explain that, it means that a vast majority of our trips could be done by an electric vehicle, excluding the use or the actual service that the vehicle requires. If it needs to haul a certain amount, some vehicles couldn't be replaced, but the trip distance could for the vast majority, yes.
Thank you.
And to continue on that point, I'll zoom out here a tad. There's a green line going across the graph. That green line right now is our Ford F-150 going 67 kilometers. Ooh, you guys can't see that at all. 67 kilometers, which is double the average pickup truck distance that we drive in 2023. So the average pickup truck drove 38 kilometers in a day. Doubling that is the green line on the graph. The pickup truck, or the F-150, to drive 76 kilometers, it would take the current charging situation that we have for that vehicle 5.1 hours to recharge 76 kilometers. Whereas if we were to drive 300 kilometers, I'll go 250, the driving or the time to charge would be 17 hours.
Councilor Payne, then Councilor Woodward.
So that is a very slow charger.
It is a
That is- that's-
6.24 kilowatt charger.
So
It
that's
is-
part of the plan then, is to upgrade the charging, because normally with a high-speed charger, you could do that in half an hour, couldn't you?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to.
Yes. So this is a very small level 2 charger. There are options. In the budget, we have budget for a 19.2 kilowatt charger. If I were to replace that, 19.2, the same 250 kilometer trip now takes 5.5 hours to charge. So a part of this conversation, which is included in the financial aspect, but will need to be planned for, is the level of charging to influence or...
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question would be battery life if we're charging fast every day compared to slow charge overnight or something. But I heard fast charging can wear a battery down quicker.
It does. It brings the typical cycle life around 2,000 right now for these, the current batteries. It does bring it down by 10 to 20% if you do it consistently. So it does have an impact. We wouldn't see that for a while though. So, and fast charging, level 3 charging, which is somewhere above 25 kilowatts, is fairly expensive. So unless we have a vehicle going very far, or we have maybe a future medium or heavy duty vehicle that requires a lot of battery use for hauling or towing or moving people around in buses, we don't necessarily need that unless we're double shifting or the time to charge is too long for the current vehicle service. Then we have to up the the charging capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Panero?
So in some of the scenarios with the current charger we have, our fleet basically can only work one day on, one day off.
If we were to drive this amount, yes, but again, we only drive 38 kilometers a day. So I think
But that takes, what did you say, sorry?
5 hours.
I can put that in.
7 hours.
38 kilometers on our current charging.
The current pickup right now, it basically runs all week, and then on the weekend gets plugged in over the weekend.
Can
And then
you
it's
tell
ready to
what
go
the
again
answer to
for
the question
basically
is
another
when
week.
Joey's finished?
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours?
Yep. So 38 kilometers daily would take 2.6 hours
On
Okay,
a small charger.
on a real small.
on a small one. So it's not, okay.
It's not impactful now, but this is potentially not the highest used vehicle either. There are some Nelson Hydro trucks that have to go around servicing a larger region
Yeah.
that potentially would require a larger charger to meet the service demands.
And also, look, what Graham had said was double shifting vehicles. So we have, just as we get into more medium duty, heavy duty vehicles in our future years, we double shift a lot of our equipment, such as sweepers, just to make it simple. We run a day shift with the sweepers, and right away we only have an hour, 2 hours between shifts, and the sweeper goes out again for all night. So that's where a fast charger would definitely have to happen to be able to, or we'd have to have double the equipment, because we wouldn't have the time frame to charge that between shifts. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Councilor Panero?
I don't know anything about this stuff. What's the lifespan of one of these superchargers, and how many of them do we have to buy to maintain this situation?
That's a great question. I guess it's hard to say the number we would buy. We would buy them as we needed them. Right now, we don't have a vehicle, and we're probably not going to purchase a vehicle in the next few years that requires that much charging capacity, unless we were to right size a vehicle that goes far distances and we would double shift it, then maybe we would need some additional charging capacity. But in the next few years, it's not something that we're in the need of at the moment.
Question. You talked about the fact that fast charging decreases batteries' life by 10 to 20%. What is the impact of not fully charging? I mean, I've been around long enough that if you didn't charge your portable telephone so to the full charge, like it would last like a day, and then, you know, like this sort of in-between charging. So we know fast wears out the battery faster. What does always going in with my tank a quarter full and charging it to half, and then a quarter full and charging it to half, like not fully charging the battery? There's got to be some implications of not fully charging the battery, or does that not make a difference?
Not necessarily. There's a 10% rule. You don't want to stay in the bottom 10% or the top 10% for too long.
Yep.
And the technology is doing its best to make those 10% smaller so that it's completely capable throughout. So there's not much of an issue at all. I'm not aware of any if you were to just go from 25 to 50 over and over.
Yeah, it's better to top up as often as you can, staying out of those 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just think of it like a gas tank in your regular combustion vehicle, you know. If you run it really low, you have the risk of burning out your fuel pump in your gas tank. So you want to keep it over the top. So in the mid-range is the best range to keep your batteries. Same theory.
Okay, I will continue. So moving on from point 5, item 5 to item 6. Or no, actually we touched item 6, we're on to item 7. I get to explain a few pathways and scenarios. Bear with me, you should see this in front of you. The second page is the beginning of this assumption baseline scenario, which includes no EVs. I want to start by mentioning that this is just a model. So there's built-in uncertainties here. I'm basing this off of industry trends, off of research, off of projections. Anything projecting past 2024 is just a projection, and really just an estimated guess. So the bands of gray are really trying to show that there's a lot of uncertainty. So we could be really good about emissions reduction. We could be potentially emitting more. The gray line in the middle is our baseline, and this baseline has a certain assumption based on it, which is that our number of vehicles is tied to our population. Our population grows at 1.2%. Our vehicles that service that population will grow at the same rate. And that is that gray line. If I were to move...
Councillor Payne.
I'm just interested in that. Is that a historical factor, the vehicles being tied to the population, or are there certain points where, it moves differently?
I believe it's fairly historical, but I only have 1 year of data. I'd have to rely on Jody.
Yeah, it's based more of the needs of the community and the department's needs. So, of course, as population grows, there needs more vehicles to serve the bigger parks, more amenities, garbage pickup, all different things like that all kind of go together. I would, again, he's mentioning this as a model. I would imagine we would peak every once in a while, then level out, but this is just for purposes of discussion more than anything else.
Perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to understand
Yeah.
that, because I'm assuming you do sort of go up and then you level off for a while and you're good and then you go
Correct.
up. So it's not thank you. That's what I
Councillor Tate.
Yeah, sorry, I have another question about that, because I just happened to have brought up the water master plan from 2018 today for fun, as you do. And at that time, we were using a long-term growth rate of 0.6%. And that's only 6 years ago, so I have a curiosity about what percent growth rate we're using, where we get it, how we maintain it. Is it like Stats Can thing?
I think it was the last census.
Census.
1.2% is the number we used. But I could adjust that. Maybe I could adjust that live. I'd be a little scared. The
Yeah,
reason this is
don't
in
do it
Excel,
live, but I was just curious, because that number, like Councillor Payne said, changes.
Yeah.
So we have to be cautious about which number we're using and definitely
Well,
reference it, where we got the number from. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is illustrative at this stage, so
Yeah.
just to give you a sense of where this might go. I think the OCP work, we're required to project our housing needs, our population growth. So ultimately, I think that is the most reliable number that we will work towards is through the OCP, and you can plug it in the model when we refine it. And at the Water Master Plan, that's what we were seeing historically, and that's what we were using in the OCP going forward. And, we've certainly seen growth beyond that in the last, 5 years or so. So it is, it's any projection you use, and this can be based on some assumptions. And do you use historical trends? Do you use recent trends? But I know they're doing that work in the OCP work, and when we have to file our housing needs report of where we see our population growth, what kind of housing we need, etc. So I think those things will have some hopefully better numbers that we can plug in the model.
Cool. Yeah, just reference where the number came from is my point.
perfect. To maybe solidify the plateauing of our fleet, this is the emissions profile. So this is that gray line broken up with numbers. So it does hit, it does plateau, it does spike and plateau, to Councillor Payne's point. Moving on, this is just the number of vehicles that our fleet contains. We start from 95, we slowly grow up to 116 over the 15-ish years. 17 years. Highlighting 2030 because that's our emissions reduction goal of 100% based on Nelson Next, which aligns with a whole bunch of international, such as the Paris Accord, international agreements that Canada's a part of.
Sorry, I have a question about this.
Yep.
These charts. So the fleet grows.
Yep.
And vehicles get replaced. So are the new vehicles included in that replacement number?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And that replacement number is the next graph.
Yep.
Number of vehicles replacing year over year. So this does include the vehicles that are not in the replacement schedule that are being added as the population grows, yes.
Gotcha. Cool, thank you.
You notice that it does kind of spike in 2030 to 2032. That is the deferred maintenance schedule that Jody has implemented. The next spike would be 12 years later, which happens to be off this graph. So in the 2040s, we do see another spike in vehicles, not included in here.
Councilor Panero, question.
Speaking of maintenance, is that sort of known, like what the differences would be in maintaining an entire fleet of EVs, considering we don't have any local options to maintain them at this point? I'm assuming we would hope that might change in the future, but like I'm assuming now we do most of the maintenance on our own vehicles in shop, right? And get in this situation, are we sending every car that breaks down, we're putting it on a truck and sending it to Calgary? Is that the plan?
We have sent 2 of our mechanics away for the basic electrification training. It is very basic. As we build our fleets towards these goals, we'll have to have additional training, plus we'll have to have additional funding in the garage to be able to tool the garage for bigger maintenance items. So far, we've been able to maintain everything in-house currently, but we haven't yet had a major breakdown. I'm purchasing vehicles right now locally with local businesses and manufacturers, or dealerships should say, so that we have support locally. We don't have to ship to Kelowna, Calgary, Vancouver, those kind of things. I think that's a very important thing I think I spoke of last year, was we should be very cognizant of that and keep it local as much as we can so that we have the support locally in case of those major breakdowns.
Does our budget then, I'm sure it does, but does it reflect that it's gonna, like our budget for vehicle maintenance is gonna obviously spike hugely as well if we need all that extra training and also more stuff to maintain a totally new type of car?
So this is, again, kind of spoke on this last year, was we're not jumping in with both feet. We're kind of dipping our toes in rather to feel it out rather than going in over our head and finding out this isn't the way it's going to work, right? So there's so many unknowns in this industry right now, is it would be pretty, I think on our part, wrong to be going overboard right away. So I think we're going the right approach is just feeling it out, doing as much research as we can, and doing the right call at the right time rather than jumping all in at once. And this is what this whole exercise is about, just information and getting a vision on the goal on where are we gonna be, and so that we can be prepared for it.
To add on that, and we'll talk about it very soon, though there's an investment that needs to happen in the maintenance of the vehicles because we don't have the current infrastructure to do so, the vehicles themselves require less maintenance. Just less moving parts, not a giant internal combustion engine vehicle or engine that needs to be serviced. So that is kind of leading me to my next point. And there's an assumption in the appendix or page 2 of the agenda, the third bullet under not included. So the price of including the EV charger maintenance infrastructure, which is an additional cost, is not included in this model, but the maintenance of the vehicle is. If that makes sense.
Could you say it again slower? The price of?
The price of the infrastructure needed to service the vehicles is not included. So the upfront cost of added equipment or the training of the staff is not included, but the actual maintenance of the vehicle is included.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Lockberg.
Graham, I've got a few questions, but I'll only start with one. In your model, and have you considered the, or has there been any consideration of the healthcare costs due to ICE vehicles? I know what we're looking at is just our balance sheet here. What's the bottom line to the city in terms of fleet replacement costs? But our responsibility as a council is the health and well-being of our residents. And so the healthcare costs of ICE vehicles are directly borne by our residents. And there's some great studies on this. And I think the best number is $3,200. If you put into direct healthcare costs per vehicle per year, it's $3,200. So we may be less, we may be more, depending on air circulation in the area, but just would like to make sure that that's on the table. So every time we can replace one of our ICE vehicles with an EV, we're saving our citizens more than just a bit on their taxes, but we're also having a direct impact on quality of air that they're going to be breathing. So again, that was a comment, but question, is this kind of thinking, is this in any of your models, or is there anything?
It
you
is
have to say about
not,
that?
unfortunately. You're right. It is more of just a financial balance sheet. So the social, health, cultural, all those other components are not included in this. This is just more of a financial modeling exercise. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
It might be helpful to have at some future point the cost of the infrastructure included with the cost of the rest of it, because it seems like that's sort of the real cost, and that would help us to determine whether we can afford it or not, wouldn't it? Like, you can't really do it without that infrastructure, so it's something that we definitely need if we're going down that road. And so knowing we're just having that, like, the two numbers added together would be interesting to see for sure.
On the grants, well, I guess I don't actually know the cost of those infrastructure pieces. There is electric vehicle charging infrastructure in there, and it's a small percentage of the total. So I can guess that the infrastructure equipment needed to service the vehicles is even smaller.
Councillor Payne.
I'm going back a couple of questions on this one, but I'm interested with the conversation which we had earlier about how the vehicle maintenance costs are less. So when I'm looking at the multi-year fleet costs, I'm confused on why going across the maintenance costs go up significantly. Understanding, like, what am I missing? I'm missing something there.
I will get to your question, but maybe I'll explain where you're
okay.
reading that from. Or maybe I'll clarify. If you're reading that from the colorful graph
Yes, I
on
am.
the screen, and the bottom is the maintenance, the gray section is the maintenance. Yeah, so maintenance does grow. I imagine that has to do something with the deferred maintenance policy or deferred maintenance schedule that Jody has gone through in pushing the lifespan of the vehicles. And again, this is also getting past Jody's vehicle replacement schedule. So his replacement
this is the
schedule.
whole fleet, not just the EV
Exactly.
component. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. That makes more sense. Got it
Yeah.
now. Sorry. I was thinking EV.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a few steps back. I ended on the total number of vehicles we're replacing each year. I will step back in at the total budget that is required to maintain, service, increase the size of our fleet. So this graph in front of us, the baseline total multi-year fleet costs. This includes the fuel, the maintenance, and the capital expenditures to keep and maintain and grow our fleet. It's also broken down into year buckets. So at the bottom there, we have 2024 to 2026. We did this because vehicles aren't necessarily replaced on the year they're scheduled to be replaced, because sometimes they haven't met the amount of service. Sometimes they're replaced beforehand because they're potentially a bit of a lemon, or sometimes they're in really good shape by their expected year of replacement, so they get pushed or deferred to a later year. So we're making the assumption that the vehicles that are scheduled to replace between 2024 and 2026 will be. We just don't know which year in that bucket they'll be replaced. So first year, $7.09 million to maintain and operate our fleet. And that grows to a spike for 2030 to 2032. And we see maybe a bit of a decline the following bucket years. Similarly, the next graph is those same numbers broken down into maintenance, gray at the bottom. Total fuel is the green line in the middle, and then the capital expenditure is the yellow on top. So this is just our baseline. This is including no EVs. This is just assuming that our fleet grows with our population. This is potentially what it could cost to operate and maintain our vehicles. Baseline. The next pathway. Up there I say council's business as usual. On your page it might say Jody's business as usual. I'm not sure which version I printed. But it's somewhere
Jody's
in
business as
between.
usual, just so you know.
Jody's
Jody's.
business.
So this is the inclusion of EVs. So recently Jody's kind of has gone through the process of every time a vehicle's up for replacement, he's considered the electric alternative. That is why we have the EVs that we do now. And this is the extension of that. So every time a light duty vehicle, which includes an SUV, a light duty truck, and select equipment, is up for replacement, the electric version is selected. That is scenario or pathway 1. On the left, we see the emissions reduction from baseline being the one above, 2026, 5%, 2030, a 12% reduction from baseline, 2040, a 30% reduction from baseline. That's graphed right in front of us. 2030 is highlighted. We go from 551 tons to 470 tons. Next graph is the number of vehicles that are getting replaced each year. Gray is baseline. 2024 it's slated. We are going to replace 10 vehicles. Of the 10, 5 are light duty that will be replaced with electric alternatives. And it changes year over year because the composition of the vehicles we replace changes year over year. But the totals are found in this graph. By 2030, we'd have a total of 24 electric vehicles. By 2040, we'd have a total of 71. On our agenda, it's also within that table under item 7, the total number of vehicles, the emissions reduction. It's also highlighted there, but you guys have the full version in front of you, so I don't need to really dwell on that.
Mayor?
Question?
Yeah, Councilor Woodward.
Thank you. So we don't know if the government says, hey, you know, we're going to push this really hard and we're going to give municipalities sizable amounts of money to speed up this process. I guess maybe this is actually for Jody as the fleet manager. Could you speed up the process? I mean, it feels like you're doing this very methodically, and you're trying to keep us out of the weeds and on track. Would it be challenging to speed it up if the money was there, or maybe that wouldn't be such a good idea? I'm just thinking about, you know, having this information coming over the long haul and the data coming into us methodically. It seems like a very smart move, but I'm wondering if there was a speed involved and money.
I guess it's kind of a two-part answer is we'd have to be prepared for one thing, mechanically in the shop.
Yes.
The shop needs to be prepared.
Yes.
Departments need to be prepared. There'd have to be a change of lifestyle in the departments on how we would manage those electric vehicles by bringing them in so quickly.
Right.
I think the other part too is what the availability is.
Right.
And does the vehicle meet the expectations of the department? So with the limitations of the types of vehicles that are available right now for the work that we want them to do currently in our departments, it would be a little bit challenging.
So slow and steady is
Well,
a smart move.
I think it's kind of, it's a smart move, but I think it's the right move for right now is it's just, we don't really have that many options right now with the F-150 being the only pickup right now that's locally purchased. The payload and the distance are challenges. So we have a lot of trucks that carry heavy loads, not every day, but they do. So this is again what Graham was referring to is how we do our business. You know, we would need to do department changes as how we do business. And that would be right sizing what vehicle goes out for what job. You know, we have several F-250s is what we're calling them, 3/4 ton pickups. They don't always haul a load of sand, but in the winter, almost every 3/4 ton's full of sand. So that's where we would run into difficulties managing how we disperse the electric vehicles for those duties. So as technology picks up and these medium duties start coming online, I don't think it would be that much of a challenge anymore. Now it's more of, let's get used to how we're gonna run these electrified vehicles.
Thank you.
Rather than it being a lifestyle change, it's more of a, okay, here we go, now we can start moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much.
I guess just to follow up on that, Jody, I mean, we don't, it's all kind of new and warm and fuzzy to think that we're gonna have all these EVs running around, but we don't go out and buy 10 vehicles in any given year because you don't want them, then they're all dead in 10 years, right? Like, we stagger the purchase of vehicles, whether they're gonna be gas, and I imagine that we stagger the purchase of vehicles if they're EVs, just knowing that an EV is gonna run out. It's not like the EV is gonna be a car that lasts now for 100 years. I mean, it's a car that's gonna wear out as well. And so you need to stagger that in terms of the cost to make sure that you have a fleet. You can't suddenly be thinking that you can replace 10 vehicles in 10 years when those 10 can no longer function, gas or electric. So the staggering your purchases, which you've always done very, I have to say, over all of the years that I've been sitting here, you've done a great job of being able to, one, keep everything running, get a few extra years out of some of this equipment, still even be able to resell that equipment. I don't care what the piece of equipment is. I think that process and that good quality work needs to continue regardless of what we're buying in the future. Councillor Tate, question.
Thanks.
And then Councillor Lockenberg.
On a bit of a different vein, I find this interesting and a little bit challenging because from our other budget pages, usually operations and capital is separated. So it's difficult for me to understand because fuel and maintenance, does that usually fall under operations?
So even though we fund the capital purchases out of the reserves are funded by amount of that we charge our vehicles out to replace that vehicle. So all of it ultimately ends up in operating because we say, that vehicle, it has to pay for its fuel, it has to pay for its maintenance, and it has to pay for its replacement. So that's what we charge a vehicle out at, so it can do all three of those things. So those, that's, to me, ultimately the council decision. How much are you willing to fund a higher replacement value to electrify is really what the budget implication is. The reserve is going to pick up those peaks and valleys as long as we fund the reserve to the right amount. So you saw in those scenarios, if we're really aggressive and if the province says we must electrify by 2030, then there's a huge valley because we're not putting that type of money away to replace all our vehicles in that short period of time. It's over a much longer period of time. So ultimately, all that ends up on the operating side.
Does the city fleet pay Nelson Hydro for electricity? Like, is that a charge in our operating expenses?
I would.
Because when you say fuel, maintenance, capital, and that one just above this, the fuel, like diesel and gasoline, will go down. And my question is, does the electricity charges in our operations go up?
It
yes.
would,
Okay. And that's obviously accounted for in those gray bars. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. And to kind of skip a point, we were talking about medium and heavy duty vehicles. This scenario, there's a last little bit here, plus 2030 medium duty. So the BC government has mandated that by 2030, dealerships have to only sell plug-in vehicles. That's also modeled in here. By 2030, that's assuming our F-250s and above, which are a vehicle that you purchase through a dealership for the most part, are also electric. So we're also including some technology that is not currently available into this model, into this scenario. So that's why in these last few years, 2036 to 2040, there's potentially more EVs being purchased in this pathway, because that includes the medium-duty trucks, which we have a lot of. We're assuming that they can be electrified, which is a large assumption in itself.
Councillor Lockhart.
So I have a question, but first, just a clarification on that. Are you saying in the business as usual scenario that because we're going to be mandated to be purchasing electric vehicles by 2030, what's not represented is a big spike in EVs that we'll have to acquire post 2030? Like it'll be a bubble of vehicles. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily a giant spike. The number we're purchasing is right in front of us on this graph. The number of vehicles being replaced that are electric. So we do see a spike in 2035, 2036. That's because the medium-duty vehicles that weren't being replaced as electric prior are now being replaced. So that might be, that spike in orange, 2035, 2036 might be what you're talking about.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't clear. What I was wondering about, if we're replacing 8 to 10 vehicles a year post 2030, all of them electric. But that's not showing on the
That,
graph.
yeah, this is not including the second VC mandate, which is
Okay.
the next pathway, which I'll talk
Okay.
about.
So that was my clarification.
Sorry,
I wasn't
sorry.
clear on that.
So just to clarify, so if the province requires dealerships only to sell electric vehicles by 2030, I think this is availability of the vehicle. So we
Yeah.
must now, there's no gas vehicle to buy.
buy,
So
yeah.
so that vehicle may come up in 2031 or 2032 or 2033,
Yeah.
whenever it comes up.
Right.
When we need to replace it after 2030, there's no gas
Yeah.
option, so we're buying electric vehicles. I think that's what this scenario is not that it's mandated that you have to have replaced all your vehicles by 2030.
No.
Rather, there's no supply of.
There's no supply. Yeah.
Yes.
But I was trying to see how that affected the baseline there.
That's the next.
And sorry, just one last thing to clarify that. This was also the medium duty, right? So your 3/4 tons
Yep.
and 1 tons. So
Yeah,
that's
come on,
that difference in
2035.
2035 where all of a sudden
Come on.
they will have to be an option.
Right.
So then if we're just replacing as they come up, previously they weren't an option, now they will have to be an option, hence the increase to that 8 and 9 number there.
Got it.
Yes.
So the question was, in the assuming that we've got this transition happening, then you would think that the resale values of the gas vehicles will go through the floor. Is that in your modeling at all?
It isn't, no. And there's a few other kind of similar points as well. The price of electricity potentially could increase because more electrical demand is required to fuel these vehicles. Not included, it's just a general inflation rate as well. So it's a good consideration, it's just maybe too much projection.
On the
for
flip
me.
side, then clarifying, no inflation or no spike in gas costs either.
No,
this
just assuming inflation now is inflation in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Page.
I just might speculate we may not see the price of the value fall through the floor. It might go the other way.
I think so.
You can't buy a purely internal combustion. It'd be more of a collector's item. Be harder to
Be a
obtain.
lot of collector items.
Well, you're still selling fuel. Just saying you can't buy new stuff, so might go up.
Like baseball cards.
Yeah.
Just billions of them.
Well,
No shortage of them everywhere.
It is a possibility.
Yeah. Something that we, as
care of.
time gets closer, we could kind of track that a little bit better, and that could make its way into this modeling. So that could become a part of something that we,
well, you're gonna have to find a balance between what premium are you paying for the EV or
Yeah.
no. I like to go just no emission option.
yeah,
How much for premium versus how much
yeah,
appreciation is going on.
yep.
The other, if I may, the other thing to consider is we already know that the potential floor of an EV cost to manufacture and deliver a high quality EV is so much lower than an ICE vehicle. Like you're getting $10,000 EVs and being made in China that are really comparable. The only thing keeping them out of Canada is trade policy at scale. If that changes, and it very likely will, we should be able to see EV costs a fraction of what internal combustion engine vehicles are.
You better start that campaign pretty soon, Councillor Lockenberg, seeing as how the Americans have like 110% tariff on EV coming from China currently, and usually when, you know, as they like to say, when America sneezes, Canada catches pneumonia, so
Yeah, but that
make
just means
sure that you,
more vehicles for us.
make sure that you start talking, make sure that our tariffs stay low here so that we can have some kind of affordability.
Yeah.
I will continue to explain some of these graphs. This is the baseline compared to Pathway 1, baseline being no EVs, Pathway 1 being EVs when they're up for replacement and they have a replacement. A bit of a spike in the first bucket because we're paying a premium of roughly 20% on these light-duty vehicles, and then it levels off, and we may even see savings due to lower fuel and maintenance costs of electricity, or lower fuel costs of electricity and lower maintenance costs of EVs. And that's broken down into these next two table graphs. Again, yellow being capital expenditure. You're paying more for the vehicle still, but you're saving in fuel and maintenance is the point. But for the sake of time, I'll move on to the last pathway. This is the BC government regulation pathway. Again, it's based off of the graph on the second page of the agenda. Down at the bottom, this is the milestone option. The milestones are the vehicle classifications and the amount of stock that you have to acquire by those dates. Again, this is all up for change because the BC government is doing studies to see the impact of this. So there's potential for it to be pushed back in severity and in year. But this is their proposal as of May 2023. So for instance, 25% of our light duty vehicles have to be electric by 2029 is what this regulation states. Similarly, by 2033, 25% of our heavy duty vehicles have to be electric. That's assuming that there are heavy duty electric alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's power boost in the Ford F-150, but not the Ford 250s yet.
Not yet, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the hybrid option.
Yeah.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So, like, those are pretty aggressive timelines, and I'm just thinking, like, man, replacement of a garbage truck would be steep. Or, I mean, I'm wondering, like, do emergency vehicles or garbage trucks or that kind of stuff, I mean, are they included, or, because that seems like a whole nother level of pushing municipalities to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how hard they're gonna push. You know, this is just a document that's come out. They're saying everything, so again, it's the availability. There isn't even anything around that's available, so they would really have to ramp up their production in the medium to heavy fleets to be able to meet this mandate, for sure. So our hands are kind of tied, as well as what's gonna come to this west coast and how quickly.
So like we're just, we're a moment away from this ladder truck, for example. I think it's 1.2 million for the ladder truck, the new ladder truck we're buying.
I think it's 2.25.
Okay, 2.25.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a huge investment, and then, a few years later, they're like, everything has to be.
5 years later, we gotta push it into the lake or something.
I mean, I just wonder, like,
Just can't buy it
the
in 5
realism.
years. You can use it for as long as you want.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess I should mention that we do see pilots in some of these medium and heavy duty vehicles. So there are electric fire trucks, maybe not ladder trucks, but the pumpers that are less expensive, but you're paying a 200% premium on them in some cases. So we have to find that balance point, and the technology definitely has to mature for this to be a viable option. But tracking it based off of what the government is saying for now is what Pathway 2 is all about.
Okay, thank you.
Panero, sorry.
Sorry.
Councillor Panero.
Just a point of like empathy with what you guys are dealing with, but like,
Point of empathy.
honestly, if this purple line here, if this is a government mandate That's the mandate path, and that puts us 2 million in the hole for our replacement reserve fund, just that fund. Assuming that, like, haven't been here that long, but I kind of get the impression that we're pretty good with our reserves and like we manage our money pretty well. And so that 2 million in the hole number is probably on the happy side of other municipalities in the province. And so at some point, I mean, it's kind of crazy to mandate that dealerships sell vehicles that don't exist 5 years from now.
They'll exist.
And it will be 2035.
Kazam. Like
Massively easy to scale relative to other technologies.
It's just, but I mean, if every municipality is 2 million in the hole and just that one budgetary line, like, I would assume that it's not a doable thing.
Per 10,000 population.
Right. So
Right.
extrapolate that by
Yeah.
like every city that's actually like city sized, and it's just not gonna happen. So I mean, I don't know, that doesn't make your life any easier, but the unknowns here are like off the chart.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing that we really wanted to bring up here is, the message is clear, us as a local government can't fund this within our resources. If the provinces or other levels of government want this to happen, then they need to come to the table, because it is pretty hard for us to, fund this through property taxes and this type of transition. So that's, marching orders of local governments to say, we need help, just as they have in other areas, whether it's, the grants we get to, to upgrade our buildings, et cetera. So we wanted to quantify that so that you had a sense of what that shortfall would be.
Yeah, just to go off of that, we had some pretty substantial increases in vehicle prices anyway, and that's what we were dealing with. So part of this original budget we had was to each year, every year over the 5-year financial plan, is add more of a contribution to that equipment reserve, keep building that up and catch that up so that we're able to follow Jody's plan here. And I think Graham probably has this worked into his spreadsheet, but if we were going to do this on our own, that sort of aggressive funding of our equipment reserve, we'd have to double that increase each year just to lift that up. So it was already going to be a challenging ask. This just makes it a little bit more challenging, I think.
What's the contribution? Remind me what is our contribution right now?
Yeah, so I think it's we've got $1 million in there for.
Sorry.
It's on the
1.56.
first page of the large paper handout.
Thanks.
It is.
And you can see that increase each year, then it goes
Got it.
to 1.1, 1.2, 1.3.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
And that is what gets us the gray line that we see now, which is past 2028 is projected.
Yeah.
And that's also extrapolated for the Jody or council's business as usual in the orange, and then this BC government mandate in purple. One notable point is that they kind of follow the same trajectory in the first few years. So we're kind of on path to hit either point as we're going now, which is one positive note. And it says, and it kind of shows that Jody's kind of it's setting us up to be able to respond to some regulation if we need to. Sorry.
Councilor Zuckerberg has a question.
Yeah. First of all, guys, thanks for this work.
Yeah.
Graham, for putting this model and vision together, and Jody, obviously, for all the work you and your team do to keep the fleet running. Like, one of the things that I've experienced over the last 6 years here is the quality of work that you do, and it shows with the ability to keep a lot of these vehicles on the road. And one of the things I want to say on a higher level about a lot of these policies around the transition is something we said way back in 2018, 2019 when some of us first took office, which was this transition that we're going through this decade is going to be hard. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard at every level. Mm-hmm. And it's not like we're ultimately struggling to just stay on track with our business as usual, let alone bend the curve to more sustainability. With that in mind, but the difficulty here, I do see some bright signs of optimism that may not be included in your model, and that's good that you're playing conservative. But one thing, for example, is how the cost of solar panels is dropping through the floor. The cost of EVs dropping through the floor. The price parity with ICE vehicles will be 2027. So we should see the cost for an EV to be comparable to the cost of a gas-powered vehicle by 2027, and then dropping below that. So by 2030, 2035, depending if this is an exponential curve, and China we can overcome that trade policy, we could see pickup trucks for $10,000, $12,000 price adjusted by 2030. Right now, the models are, when you show what could you deliver, how much would it cost to deliver EV and still make a profit, for example, with Chinese manufacturers, but we could replicate it in Canada and the US, you can do it for $9,000, $8,000, $9,000. So that ability to deliver a relatively simple vehicle for so much cheaper suggests that we should see those impacts coming to support the transition. But again, this is all of this, acknowledging the fact that the transition, even if it's to something better, is still difficult. It requires retooling, a lot of processes and systems that you have going on down there in the shop. And I totally hear that. And I just want you to know that we're still going to keep the pressure on to hit those targets that we set back then, but also acknowledging that it's difficult. It's really difficult work. So overall, thanks for that.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, thanks for that. I will just say that I'm definitely in the same boat of reducing the emission profile of our fleet, and Pathway 2 even still doesn't quite align with our aspiration, and I'm not sure if that's going to be one of the graphs is showing that. Guess not. But it speaks to me that we will have to revisit that aspiration now that we're getting some tooled data, and the plan is meant to be flexible and responsive, and so I would hope we would see how that gets incorporated. Is it 2/3 by 2035, for instance, to get there? When I'm looking at this increased contribution by amount and looking at this slump on the purple line that takes us into the 2.5 million at one point, am I correct that we want to basically be adding about $250,000 now to every contribution to dig ourselves out of that hole?
It's a great guess, and you're very close. It is increasing our current $100,000 contribution by another $100,000. So if, to demonstrate that, the purple line dips below zero, if I were to include $100,000.
The interest income as the $100,000, where's the $100,000?
That's our extra contribution to the reserves.
There you go.
So if I were to increase the contribution, currently it's $100,000 each year. If I were to increase it by $100,000, making it $200,000 between the years 2025 to 2030, that would keep our reserve above $1 million, even for the BC mandated scenario.
Great, do it.
Can you do it with 50,000?
I could,
Please?
I could show you 50,000.
I mean, I can do it, but it's funner on the screen.
So 50,000 means we dip almost to zero by 2030 or to zero by 2030.
So,
And that's not factoring in
Just
lower cost of vehicles.
If that exists.
Or
That's a speculation. That's another unknown. That's another assumption.
so what's important
Cost.
for me from
Technology
the
trend.
finance point of view is there are many opportunities that may manifest over time. I'm not necessarily in the boat that we want to support the Chinese dumping of assets into capturing that entire EV market. I do think there's value to keeping it in North America. But from our perspective, I think what we want to be doing is planning for the expensive option and then heavily relying on our team to keep finding the non-expensive options and then adjusting ourselves down. But preparing for that we might end up with bills that are that they may not materialize by the time we get to those checkpoints. But to have the monies available to do it, and then looking to see that we find those cost savings and those opportunities to buy hybrid vehicles that cut out a ton of miles traveled on the emission profile and all those other day-to-day things, but not to hamstring us by the financial component by not putting money in early enough. And if it's realized money later, that's hopefully something we can hand to a future council to reallocate.
So I think in summary, Councillor Page, perhaps you're addressing the fact that when we go to budget deliberations in the fall, that we need to give some serious contemplation to increasing this budget line. I think that's what you were saying there.
Yep.
So I think that this is why it's great to have these workshops early on, because the more of these we have as we get into September and October, and perhaps some of us have wish lists of other things that we want to see get into the budget, that we might have to decide whether or not those stay on while we look at what we might consider some of the basic infrastructure needs of the organization going forward. So we've heard 100,000 is kind of a magic number here. 50,000 makes things not look too bad. And we know that, what we do know is that we have confidence in our team to make sure that when there's opportunity to be looking at these vehicles, when what's available can be replaced with something that's an EV or a ZE, that we are continuing to do that based on all of the stumbling blocks that there are now, the biggest one still being availability. But to continue to go forward, I mean, we could adopt the BC plan, but I think the Jody Cayley plan, when I look at it, works well. And the fact that as we go through that plan, if we do budget-wise add some more money, we have it there if some, miracle on 34th Street happens, and that prices plummet, more vehicles come online, that there's more availability for us to be able to purchase here in Western Canada with local dealers and such, that I think that's, this is what we wanted to hear, because we do need to be turning our minds to what the fall budget rounds are going to look like. So.
And Mayor,
sorry, Councillor Payne and then Councillor Woodward.
I'm just interested, I know we've had a lot of focus on the moving to electric vehicles or no emission vehicles, whatever we want to call them. But there were two other components of the plan that you did talk about, the vehicle right sizing and the influencing driver habits, which I'm presuming is reducing idling within the vehicles that are driven by the city. Do you have any, I'm presuming you have some sort of modeling on what sort of reductions we'll get there. Did I miss that graph, or is that?
No, you're...
I'm just really interested what sort of piece of the pie we're looking at there, because that is something we can influence more quickly, I would understand, than some of these other factors.
Yeah, I'm right there now.
Oh,
this is not part of anything that you can see, so unfortunately it's only on the screen. So
no problem.
You're very correct. The first option in what this presentation has been all about has been technology change.
Yes.
But there are two other levers we can pull on here. Vehicle right sizing, using the best vehicle for the job. I can talk about some potential impacts. I'm estimating roughly a 5% total fleet emissions reduction or fuel consumption reduction, which would be equating to converting our entire police department from internal combustion engines to EV in the impact to its GHG emissions reduction. So
wow, nice.
Just by planning to use vehicles, we could potentially see 5% plus fuel consumption reduction. That's right sizing. That requires some buy-in from everyone to kind of use the vehicle, the most appropriate vehicle. The second or third version is, I'm going to just say driver training, how we use the vehicle. So yeah, idling is a component of that, but it's also harsh braking, accelerating, turning, and some route optimization. So driving the vehicle up a hill as few times as you can to increase the mile per hour or mile per gallon rate. Here, anecdotally, there's a difference between our best driver and our worst driver of 35% fuel consumption. So we can save potentially somewhere in the range of 5 to 15% the amount of fuel if we implement a citywide driver training program. And that is something we're scheduling, or we're in the chats of developing. And if it's 10%, that would be the equivalent of removing our entire fleet or fire department from the road or converting it to electric vehicles. So these other two levers are something that we can work on now in conjunction with replacing internal combustion engine vehicles with EV or technology change that we're doing incrementally as vehicles come up. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up and allowing me to chat about that.
It's always my place to start. The dollar you don't spend is.
Mayor, I know we have BC Transit up next. I just was wondering, because we're such a small municipality trying to do this, and so are Castlegar and Trail, and I'm wondering if there'd be a possibility of kind of bulk buying with other local municipalities, because if we're all kind of working in our silos trying to match what the government wants, I'm wondering, if there would be a possibility that we could bulk buy.
Well, we've kind of already moved towards that with procuring through Canoe.
Right.
That was brought on Sourcewell, if that rings another bell. They've changed their name several times. Currently, it's Canoe, and that's kind of bulk buying. The procurement process is even across the board. So we did do a little research a few years ago of trying to bulk buy, but dealerships weren't biting on it. It was, the price was this. You buy 10, the price doesn't change. So, but Canoe has been a huge savings for the city.
Okay.
Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor seeing no further questions, and we do have transit coming in. I'll save my transit question about fleet until September or October when we have you back again. But anyways, thank you for that. Thank you for this. Thank you for the fact that it's interactive and live, and that we can see what changing the numbers look like immediately. So that's always lovely.
Thank you.
And thank you for printing these out. I'm the one that really has a hard time seeing that when I saw it on my little screen, well, my big screen, I can hardly make it out. So I do appreciate the fact that it came in a larger version.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, this is really well done.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. So they're on.
Hi, David. We're ready for you now.
Yep, let me just give you an introduction here, David, not that it's, so we're just moving on to item 6B of tonight's agenda, BC Transit Exchange Update, and I'd like to welcome, joining us, David Lenton from BC Transit will be presenting to council regarding an update on the Victoria Street Transit Exchange. So over to you, David.
Sure, thank you very much. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, so good evening, Nelson. Well, greetings from the city of Victoria, or technically Langford, just outside Victoria. Once again, my name is David Lenton. I'm a project manager with the low carbon and on-street infrastructure team in the project delivery group here at BC Transit. So tonight I'll be giving you a quick update on our design progress and where we've come from, where we are, as well as a forecast schedule for our design and construction and the communications that are going to be part with that going forward. So the Victoria Street Transit Exchange was initially presented to council back on February 20th. And what was presented was a 30% conceptual design that was based on the approved business case. From that presentation, there were concerns raised about the impact to on-street parking and the existing loading zone, and therefore the effect that this project will have on local businesses. So through the next stage, the 60% detailed design, we reviewed with our engineers the best way to address these items. And the 90% detailed design stage, which is where we are now, we were able to prove some changes that we feel will be very beneficial to the local area and provide a better product at the end. As well,
Sorry, David, just to interrupt you there. Your slides are not advancing there.
Oh. Do you not see that bit?
We just see what would appear to be like the presenter view, where you have the sort of slides down the side, and then it's still just sitting on the cover slide.
Just click on the slide, the next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you click on the next slide on the side, or maybe stop?
It just goes
Yeah.
to the bigger.
It's easier for him because then he can. There's not too many more slides though. I think there's.
That looks better. Try advancing a slide now.
There you go. You got it now.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, so as I mentioned, so here's who I am, and here's what we're going to be speaking about here today. Yeah, this doesn't really work in front of me. Here we go. Okay, how about this?
There we go.
Perfect. Sorry about that. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, the 30% conceptual design was presented to council back on February 20th. This was found in our approved business case. From that presentation, there were concerns raised about the impact of on-street parking and existing loading zone, and therefore the effect it will have on local businesses. The 60% design stage gate was then reused to review how we can best address these items. We moved forward through to the 90% detailed design with changes to it that we feel will be very beneficial to the project and the end product. Recently, we received a stage gate approval from our project owner and sponsor, which is our division VP. That came to me last week after a presentation. And so we're comfortable moving forward with design and budget. So here's the revised design then. As you can tell, of course, it's still just one block long with the transit exchange, so there's not a whole lot to expect. But what we did do was remove the mid-block crosswalk. As you can tell from its location, it's no longer really relatively mid-block, it's off to the side, and as a result, it was not going to be terribly functional for us. In the process of removing that, we were able to add additional on-street public parking stalls on the north side, and on the south side, we were able to retain the loading zone, as well as enlarge it and reposition it a little bit, as you can imagine, for vehicles, transit buses specifically, coming up from Kootenai Street and moving on to Victoria Street, and that portion of the loading zone would be in conflict with that party movement, so we're able to reposition some.
Okay, David, I have a question from Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. David,
Yes.
with these changes, is expansion still possible if we need to put more buses in there? Do you feel?
Indeed. So expansion, there's possibilities on both sides of the road. Unfortunately, it'll impact both either the loading zone or the on-street parking. So that will be something to address at that time in the future when expansion is on the horizon. Our business case would call for up to 6 bus bays, and we're providing 5 here in this project.
Okay, thank you, David.
So moving forward then, our forecast schedule. So in the month of July, sort of early to mid-July, we're expecting the design completion and approval by the city, and at which time we'll be installing the project sign, which is the requirement of our ISIP funding requirement. ISIP is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, so they are putting 40% of the bill, with 40% being delivered by BC Transit and the balance of 20% by the city. About mid to end of July, you'll be looking at posting the tender to BC Bid, and as well teaming that with a media advisory, advising the general public that construction is coming in the next month or so, and any sort of changes or plans accordingly. Residents, business owners, the library, anybody that's frequents the area can expect construction to be occurring shortly. In August time, about mid-month, we expect the contract to be awarded, at which point we'll be issuing a media release announcing the contract award, a successful contractor, as well as the proposed schedule to move forward. And at the end of the month, we anticipate construction to start in earnest, with the contractor engaging local businesses, the library, residents, to ensure that they're all on the same page to what the schedule is and what impacts are going to be faced by going forward. In September, we anticipate releasing or realizing the 50% construction milestone and communications largely ongoing through the contractor. However, both the city and BC Transit will be there and sort of bigger picture idea in order to provide any sort of information or address people's concerns. And then lastly, in October, closer to the end of the month, we anticipate reaching the substantial completion, or what's known as the in-service date. And also at that time, we'll be issuing a media release announcing the project completion, and at which point the general public can expect to use this new exchange versus the previous one there on paper and board. One thing I want to note as well is that we do have a provincial election coming this fall, which will restrict our BC Transit's communication abilities, as it may look beneficial to either the incumbent party or the local MLAs. And as a result, this communications plan is subject to change due to the provincial governor's RIP period, where our communications is for operational advisors only. Are there any questions?
So, Councillor Payne.
Hi, David. I'm just interested in, from previous experience, what the in-service date looks like. So does that mean on Saturday the buses are where they are now, and then on Monday all the buses are over at the new exchange when we make that change? Is that how it generally works?
Yeah, that's something where we'll be working with Jody and the transit team there to determine what the best way forward is. It might be one of those things where we provide, once we know with the contractor as to when we anticipate that new exchange should be in service, then we'll post very much publicly with plenty of advance warning as to when people can expect that service to be relocated. So we'll put up plenty of signage at the existing exchange and the new ones as to when people can expect that change to be actually put in service.
Okay, but it is that sort of one, like, I assume communication is going to be amazing, but it's going to be one day it closes and the next day, because we don't have Sunday service, it'll just open up somewhere else. That's normally how it
Pretty
works.
much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be pretty much a hard stop at one location and then open
Okay.
at a second location.
That's what I just wanted some clarity on.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wonder, David, if you could, because it's been a while since this has been before council, if you just go back to the 90% detailed design and just walk through what all is involved in this project, because I think there's new sidewalks and washrooms and trees and exchange things, etc.
Okay, so do you see this now?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no?
Okay.
There it is. You've got it now.
Okay, perfect. So we have the Victoria Street between Kootenay and Stanley Street, and on the north side, we'll have a completely redone curb and gutter and sidewalk from one end to the other. 3 transit shelters will be installed, complete with in-roof lighting, so there'll be lighting attached to the street lighting network, and 3 bus bays on the north side. On the south side as well, we're going to be replacing all new curb and gutter and sidewalk throughout with 2 new bus shelters here, new street lighting throughout as well, so there'll be a new standard street lighting through that area. And the public restroom will be located over here on the corner where the existing landscaping feature is beside the library. It'll be an urban design that is the city is already familiar with, and will be perfectly accessible for all persons as well. Over here on this side, will also feature bike racks in close proximity with the exchange, as well as a water fountain for the proximity as you guys get there in Nelson. 4 on-street parking stalls here on the north side, of course, the loading zone on the south side, and the driveways to both properties will remain accessible. And otherwise, we will have concrete bus bays for added durability in the long term, as well as some revised paint markings throughout. And this Pride crosswalk over here on Stanley will be repositioned and repainted as well.
That's great. That's great.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Payne.
I'm just interested how this affects the parking on the south side of Stanley Street that's currently being used by the library, and the police station. Will there still be those 4 spots there? Thank you. It's just sort of hard to
And then one spot might be even bigger. I mean, that's, some of those things are cities work to look at, maybe making a handicap
Just
spot
hard to
there.
tell from the diagram, so.
Yeah,
I want to
yeah, it doesn't
clarify.
go around the corner enough, but they're still there.
Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you. Will there be like electronic billboards with bus times and such installed here? Or would we still just be like a, a paper copy on a post?
For the time being, each of the bus shelters will retain map cases, so the schedule and the route maps will be contained therein. I'm afraid I'm not familiar if the NextRide system or the other digital systems that we use are available in Nelson just yet. Jody, perhaps can you comment better?
Currently, no.
No, so it'll just be paper poster?
Well, there'll be lit background on the bus shelters themselves
Okay,
in large profile.
great. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Page.
The crosswalk along Stanley has been one that we've spent time every year painting for Pride. Is there an opportunity here to make that permanent and use some of the, I know Trail did that, did an installation of a sidewalk that is a permanent product. It's colored.
I don't have it. David, do you have information on a permanent? I know we were having trouble finding even a durable paint for that.
Yeah, I've been working with the engineer on that. We'll have to turn over to the community a little bit with respect to what is available in the marketplace, thermoplast versus paint. Thermoplast is harder wearing, but it's more difficult to come by. So we'll have to see what the construction community has out there in terms of what is available for us, in terms of what is sort of readily available or accessible versus cost. So we'll have to see what comes back to us during the 10-year period.
But if you've got information, Keith, you could pass it on to me and we could forward it to David.
Yeah, send you what Trail did.
Sure.
But like if we could make that permanent and then take some labor out of the yearly.
Councillor Tate.
Okay, thanks very much. I have a question that relates to this intersection. So that Stanley and Victoria intersection is a hot mess for pedestrians at the best of times because of the way the cars are parked and I see that there's a new concrete, what's that called, bump out, which is great. I think that those are designed to slow traffic. I have a curiosity, and this might be a planning department thing, about having a crosswalk only on one side of that intersection so that we can have sometimes when people are going in both directions, cars get stuck in the middle. It's just really a difficult intersection. Is there anything more unusual that we can do while we're in there? Or also further up the street, we just put those flashy lights, which I thought was really cool by the school.
Yeah.
Flashy lights.
I like the flashy lights.
Maybe GM can, I don't know. Is it fixable? I don't know.
Yeah, we're hoping that the bump outs will actually provide quite a bit there. They provide a much better line of sight from the edge of that looking up and down Stanley. I think with Stanley, you're also kind of running into just a general problem that people come down there too quickly anyways. You don't see that as much coming down Ward as an example, the one block down. Definitely can look into the lights when we get there. Those were solar installations that Public Works is quite excited about. I can talk to them about that, but I think, we're keen to wait and see how the bump outs work.
Okay.
And generally just people being a bit more aware and slowing down. I mean, they have just exited a school zone just above there and seem to kind of let off the brakes a bit between then and downtown. So keen to see how the bump outs work, but we can continue to look at that going forward.
Thank you.
Or we could just maintain it as 30K all the way down,
What's the width?
which is in Nelson next.
I think it's
It does
getting
one of
narrow. The
these.
crosswalks now are gonna be narrower because of
it's
the
the
bump
narrowing
out. So
that
you're
slows it
gonna,
down.
so it does bring you out as a pedestrian out further before you step into the danger
The
zone.
yellow line also jogs
Yeah.
like a bunch of feet through the intersection. It's like here and then it's here.
We know what road Councillor Tate takes to come downtown.
I don't understand.
Just ripping down Stanley all the time.
Foot off the brake.
So, councillors, any further questions?
Exciting. It's great.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Waiting. Patiently.
Okay, so
Yeah, just comment, thanks to the BC Transit team and our team to, hear from the public and look at some changes that I think better reflect what that council is hearing from, especially the businesses in that area. So I think great improvements and, the infrastructure improvements that will go along with this is, quite exciting. Everybody knows what that sidewalk in front of the, the government building on Victoria is like. It slopes and it's, so all that, those improvements that will go on that block and some trees on that block, et cetera. So it's a substantially, I think it really meets the needs a lot more than in the past. And I know people have questioned the cost of it, but as soon as you start replacing sidewalks and all curb and gutter and all those things, and concrete for the bus bays, et cetera, it's not just putting up a couple bus shelters. So, and it's, 80% is paid by, higher levels of government. So this is a real win for the city of Nelson.
Can you remind me, because I see that the provincial writ period will affect communications. I thought it was mostly federally funded.
it's 40,
It's 40,
40, 40, 20.
40, 40, 20. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
And so I guess I was going to ask that question, but now you brought it up, Councilor Tate.
Sorry.
Just, David, because of the fact that we're looking now at this being finished for late October, so we know the election date is, Councilor Lockenberg, you will remind me, is
October
what's the date? The
October
21st?
16th.
20, October 21st or whatever.
I thought it was the 16th.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That if for any reason we can move this, do we have to, I guess my thing is do we have to wait to have a media release officially before we can start operating this if we're ready to go? Like if there's a big government transition and you're still kind of hands tied, even though the election is completed, can we start the operation of this new transit exchange like a soft opening and then have a media splash and ribbon cutting in mid-November? How does that work in case things change dramatically come the middle of October?
Quite possibly. I'm afraid I'm not totally familiar with the sort of rules and regs behind communications and government relations, but I can certainly speak to our comms team and our government relations manager for Nelson to see what we can do and how we can maneuver around project completion as it relates to the election and whatever the results are on that.
Councillor Page.
Election's on the 19th.
19th.
On the one side here across from the library, on the sidewalks of the bus where the shelters are, these are full rain protected shelters. It's not a lot of sidewalk there, and I'm worried about traffic moving around those units on the sidewalk. Human traffic, wheel traffic, any kind of traffic.
Yeah, so on the south side, the library side, the shelters will be all glass with sidewalls to allow for added protection. And then on the north side of the road where the sort of pink government building is, those walls have glass rear walls but will be cantilevered shelters. And we position them such that Nelson's Public Works team will still be able to use their snowplows, their sidewalk snowplows, to move down the way and get appropriate clearance from that. So hence the reason why there's no community sidewalls on that, on those three on the north side.
If you can get a sweeper in there, then it's fine.
Sounds great. Anything else come to anybody's mind after you've had a chance to look at it for a minute or two? Well, I'm really excited that see that this project is at 90% design detail and that you've had approval and that we've been able to work out some of the kinks. I think it's great, and we'll all have to go and try it out. We might have to take the bus Councillor Lockenberg, who's our transit representative, has been trying to encourage us to go and take a bus trip somewhere, and hopefully now maybe the bus trip will be in the winter and we'll all be leaving from the new bus terminus, so
Yeah.
that would be pretty exciting stuff, so. Anyways, David, thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to you coming back in as time goes on over the next few months with any further updates that you'd like to deliver. So know that you're welcome anytime just to reach out to staff if you've got something that you want to bring to council as a whole.
Well, certainly. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I've been working with your city staff here now for a good few months and looking forward to working with them, seeing this project through to completion. And I'll be there on the ground myself at the around start of construction and certainly at the end of construction as well.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you.
And Jody, thank you for staying after your other presentation and continue your great work on this project as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so council, we are now taking a break. So I think we'll break for, oh no, wait. Yep, 6 o'clock. Sorry, I'm looking at my clock there. I thought we have a whole hour to go yet. What fun. If I can have a motion to recess, please.
So moved.
And that's been moved by Councillor Page, seconded by Councillor Payne, and all those in favor, and that carries.
Hey, Rick.
We're trying to get that.
I don't even know where to find it, but I just want to mention.
It's on the, it's at the end of they're bringing it into the OCP survey too.
Okay.
Huh,
I don't
so
think it
we're
was
in-
there now, I just have 3 OCP surveys.
Oh, like to have
Which are in
the other
you know,
videos?
when the wastewater one is closing.
I don't know why.
It's pretty.
It's okay. LWMP.
How are you?
It's kind of hard work.
Who was I talking to this
We've been
week?
watching daily games.
There must have been time.
Hey, don't worry about that.
Where are we headed? Saskatchewan.
So boring.
Councillor Tate, we're live. Just so you know, you can keep talking to the Nelson Hydro manager, but we're live. Okay, so welcome back, everybody, and we are on to item 7 of tonight's meeting. And City Manager, anything that you'd like to report?
The only thing I want to acknowledge is on-time communications and executive assistant retired here, or not retired, moved on to the Castlegar. Last week was last week, and so it's really nice to recognize all the support she's given to all of us over her long career with us. So wish her the best of luck in her new role, and really excited for her.
Thank you. Yeah, so Ginger Lester, I believe it was 18 years that she spent with the City of Nelson, and opportunity to advance her career came up, and we know that she's just down the road, and she's still a resident of the City of Nelson, so we know we're still going to see her. So she might not be here every day, but she's here in spirit and around the neighborhood, because her daughter's very active in sports and such around town. So anything from anybody else? Mr. Jury?
Finance today.
Oh, that's good. So no fraud, no embezzlement, and we're still paying the bills.
Correct.
Okay. And Councilor, you all got your paycheck in the last month? Okay.
Working nice.
Okay. Councilor Page?
Yeah, I'll lift 2 things out of committee work from since the last time. So we had public reporting at the hospital board, West Kootenai Hospital Board, of the upgrades that are going forward for approval for a new MRI expansion of the trail facility, which will be about a $14 million hit on property taxes for that district over the coming years. But it will also mean a major upgrade to that facility and a removal of the mobile unit, which is also getting replaced because it'll be relocated elsewhere in the province after the permanent installation is. So the current MRI unit out there is becoming unreliable. It's operated out of a mobile tractor trailer, is what I understand it to be, and they're going to expand the building itself and put a new MRI in.
Did you say the cost was $15
It'd be $15 million.
million?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Montreal's had some substantive upgrades over the years, because we did just sort of finish the 40 million for the ambulatory care area.
Yeah, and sorry, I said 14, it's like 3.8 million is the actual number. I don't want you to go around with 15 because it's not what was in the report.
Right.
And then at our all recreation meeting, we met on a number of items. I think the one of most significance is a number of the recreation commissions and community commissions across the regional district have all passed similar motions asking to look at how we could do governance a little bit different on the committee level, which is a community services conversation. And so because there's an alignment across all these disparate parts of the system asking for something similar, we are sending staff off at looking at what a sub-regional community services would look like for Nelson and District, Salmo and G, and the South Slocan communities and Castlegar and its districts. So they're going to return back with that kind of reporting, which would be about creating a decision-making table that would consolidate things like parks and rec and libraries and economic development, so that they were having those conversations more as major cities and their urban center or the rural partners, as opposed to individual siloed based on bylaws.
Can I just,
Councillor Tate?
I'm going to riff off of that because I was in that meeting and I had a hard time understanding it, and I saw you furrow your brow. So look, there's like little subsets, kind of like Nelson and E and F kind of have a lot of services that go together. And right now those services have their own separate committees, commissions, whatever. So the idea is perhaps to find a way for those different committees and commissions for those little sub-regions to all meet at once, so that when you're talking about rec, it also takes into consideration, for example, parks, because they're separate right now. But, right, it was a long conversation.
But it's a model that works really well in Creston, and that's how they do a lot of things there. So you may have decisions that come forward and only part of the table is involved in that service, so they vote, but everybody gets to benefit from being at the conversation. Then you have another decision come forward with a different group, or maybe the whole group, and everyone gets to weigh in. And so it's just a place where it's easy for the public to access, because you're not trying to nail down all these different commission meetings. You're having these like monthly meetings where you're talking about everything. So we're going to get some reporting on what that governance structure could look like.
And just another reminder that the British Columbia government needs to, perhaps in their next mandate, look at actually finishing their review of local government, because while we got a community charter that we could utilize here in the city of Nelson, they stopped short of doing a review of regional districts, and a model that was put in 1964, I don't think really is a model that works in 2024. And so I think there needs to be some wholesale change, but if we can make some on the ground while we're moving in that direction,
I'm going to riff off that.
So be it. So riff away.
It wasn't going to be part of my report, but one of the Association of Kootenay Boundary local government advocacies we're doing is I've met with all the other presidents of the area associations, and specifically Nanaimo, the regional district of Nanaimo has been doing a lot of work around updating the Local Government Act specifically and getting that as a priority. And so we've made a joint ask into the ministers as area association presidents to elevate that work on the other side of the election, because your only shot is going to be to start it early in a term, get it finished within a term, and get it back out the door. So I've organized us to make that ask, and we're going to go in and see if we can do it. To your point.
Good. Anything else? I bypassed it. You jumped in there, and I bypassed asking the general manager if he had anything that he needed to report.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things. Maybe I'll just start off a bit with staffing. So as expected, or, as I shouldn't say as expected, as forecast, we are still in the process of trying to build out our full planning team. Been having challenges having people apply, so we're exploring some different ways to post those jobs. But just so everyone's aware, that we are down a couple of positions within the planning group, which we're still able to meet our timelines and such, but we are definitely feeling the press. It's, you know, one way of thinking, it's fortunate that, you know, we don't have a lot of smaller projects that are taking up time. You know, in the same vein, we do have a couple of larger projects that are also taking up time. But anyways, so just keep you all aware of that we continue to work on getting our planning group back up to full staffing. Similarly, on that human resources front, again, you know, we obviously heard a lot about planners not being readily available. And we've also talked a lot about just generally staffing challenges in you know, current and coming future. And another one of those that we're seeing is with our garage mechanics. So having a real difficult time finding mechanics, and you know, some of those skilled labor jobs like that are you know, proving to be somewhat difficult. So just to give a heads up that while Jody was here earlier talking about, you know, all the great work that they do down there, it is, you know, becoming challenging. So again, we're looking at more creative ways to make, you know, the city, keep the city an employer of choice and to get our jobs out there where people see them. But those are two things that we're currently dealing with. Similarly, I spent the last sort of week and a half starting to really map out, again on this resourcing piece, our capital projects that we have lining up for the next number of years. We would have discussed some of them in our capital plan when it came through, but you know, we're really trying to solidify a lot clearer a picture of what we're going to be looking at with projects coming up, you know, all the way from the big ones with, you know, the fire hall and liquid waste management plan, and you know, the wastewater treatment plant to you know, the having to now likely work on our force main quite a bit earlier than we had planned going through the river. The other projects that come up just through town, you know, looking at Baker Street, things like that. So again, just to let you know, we have a busy probably 5 to 7 years of capital projects coming at us. So, you know, I think we've all, you know, those of us that have been around here for a while, you know, have noticed the change in Nelson in the last, you know, number of years, where it seems like we've just sort of hit this point where the population is kind of showing that it's really has grown significantly and those changes are happening. And, you know, we've enjoyed a lot of great years with the current infrastructure the way that it is. And it's, you know, some of that's just demanding a little bit more attention now. So we'll be really looking toward that in the coming years. So that's just a little bit of a situational awareness for you all on those fronts. But then some other good things, I believe July 2nd, Gyro Pool opened today. So it's good to have that up and running, looking lovely. And then also we are going to be very excited to be opening the pier in the very near future here. So we're just doing the final touches. We had the crews taking off the plywood and cleaning the area up Friday, and they're back out there today. I believe the fencing will be coming down later this week, and we should be opening it up hopefully for this weekend. Yes. So really looking forward to getting that going. I think a lot of people have been by to see it now with the fully built on the canopy, and it's looking rather stunning. So really excited to get the public back into that space. And I think one of the things that I would just say is when you go down there, just recall how small the old pier was. And remember, the old pier had rotted out. It needed to be removed or replaced. Something needed to be done with it. It was really quite a bit of disrepair. But when you stand on the new pier and look out there, and just the amount of public space it's created on that waterfront is really quite lovely and substantial. So I was fortunate enough to spend some time out there last week. So hope that you all take some time to enjoy it as well.
Nice.
So, councillors, nothing. Councillor Payne, you've got a few things there.
I do. I just have a couple of things. Number one, I just wanted to acknowledge that last week I attended the Anchors AGM, and I was surprised to hear that Anchors, that was their 32nd AGM. Mm-hmm. That's how long that organization has been providing service to our community, and shifting, changing, and transitioning to the ever evolving needs of people who, need the most, and becoming just, and expanding out through the region, and becoming just a real wealth of knowledge and information that they're sharing with similar organizations, not only in Canada, but around the world in some cases. So that was really exciting to hear that. And they came together to celebrate as a group, because I know that this table has faced its challenges over the last few years, but I can't even imagine what it would be like to be sitting in that building doing that work right now. So I'm, for one, I'm incredibly grateful. A couple of things. I sort of going off what the general manager has said about our mechanics and needing more. So each year, BC Transit has an award for outstanding service. And this year, one of our lead hands at the garage, Dean Centroni, won that award. So high congratulations to that. To me, that's just a demonstration of the dedication. And he's been with, I think I wrote down 1992 is when he started with the city.
I'm thinking that I gave him a 25-year award. Maybe it was a 20-year award.
It's a 1992 on Jostle, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But pretty darn close. So the level of dedication and understanding their job, which allows that department of the city to provide such an excellent service, prolonging the life of the vehicles that we have, which is a cost saving. So you can look at it as from, pride of labor and the job that they bring, and how it saves taxpayers money as they're doing that job, which I think we all really appreciate when we, don't have to look at bigger tax increases because we haven't maintained our resources really well. The last couple of things are just to remind people that the OCP surveys, and there are 3 of them, are open until July 14th. So there's been a lot of public outreach. All of the members of the OCP committee have been out at the market and at 3 different open houses, talking to people all over the community. If you didn't make it to one of those, or you also just want to throw down some more details, this is your chance. There are 3 surveys available. And once you get through those, if you're not done, our liquid waste management plan. Now say that 3 times fast, but very integral to the operation of our city, and everybody depends on them every single day, as we know. They also have a survey, which I just did today, and I actually really enjoyed it, short, sweet, and really to the point, on focusing on what is important to us. Do we want to be innovative, save money, environmental, all of the above, and just allowing you to rank those so that they're asking for a real input from citizens. And hopefully, for me, as usual, it did increase my understanding of the whole process. So I encourage you to go out and do that one. The OCP, I don't know if I said this, those surveys close on July 14th, so you've got a couple weeks left. The liquid waste management, I think, is a newer survey, so it might be a little bit longer, but I'm not 100% sure. And that's what I had today.
Councillor Page.
I apologize, but Payne has jogged my memory on something I had wanted to convey at our last meeting report, which was at the Transit Services Committee, since we had taken over, and I think staff knows this, and just want to commend the good work. There had been 0 missed hours of transit service since we became the operator. That hasn't happened in 10 years, which means there were no canceled buses. Wow. Every bus showed up on time when it was supposed to be. So it just, and it happened as soon as we swapped over, became the operator, the stats for misses just disappeared so far.
Nice.
So
excellent
very
management.
good work.
Kudos again.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen by magic. Thanks.
It's really great news.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have mentioned this, and just on the labor front, we have worked with both locals, and they have agreed on how to come together under 339. So it's going before the labor board that has to ratify that, but we have consensus among the two locals, so we should be pulling those two groups together, hopefully in the not too distant future. So yeah, really, good news. The new folks have, fit in well. Our leadership has clearly shown results here, and I think that's why BC Transit, asked us directly to provide that service.
Yay. Excellent. Anybody else have anything to report this evening? Okay, seeing nothing. We've checked in with all of the staff. And then we're on to...
Oh, Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry. Did you just want to mention the Canada Day celebration? Because you were all over you were doing all kinds of things.
Councillor Woodward, you talk about Canada Day. I'm good. I mean, I was, pancake breakfast.
Yeah.
Some opening remarks at the opening ceremonies, along with MLA Anderson and Shelley Boyd from the Snacks Confederacy. Many thanks. I mean, really, the city, we're just there to cut the cake, but kudos out to, for sure, the Chamber of Commerce for the work they do. And I don't know how many years, it just seems to me that all my life the Chamber of Commerce have been on the park on January 1st to organize all of that. There was music all day. The weatherman played nice, except for a little bit of drizzle. My Rotary Club had a great, there was a big turnout there for the barbecue and the cotton candy machine. Lots of people, lots of opportunities to visit different booths. The what do you call it? The bouncy castle. They wouldn't let me in, but the bouncy castle, that lineup was, I'm like, why is there this band of people through the middle of the park? And then I realized that's the lineup of young people wanting to get into the bouncy castle. So that was lots of fun. And then, of course, many thanks again to all those who contribute money, but to the great work that our local Nelson Fire Department does in ensuring that we have a safe fireworks display at the end of the evening to round it all out. And thank you. I didn't see Councillor Payne. You're normally there somewhere. I'm sure you were. Councillor Woodward was there. Councillor Page was there. Councillor Tate serving cake. I think I heard that we served 800 pieces of cake yesterday.
That's cakes.
Yeah, I'd say by the time I was finished, I looked like I served 800 pieces of cake. So I think it was a good time had by all, as it is always on Canada Day, and just that opportunity to reflect that we do live in probably one of the best countries in the world. So we shouldn't take that for granted at any time.
Just an interesting fact on the fireworks. I was talking to the fire chief today. One of the biggest things that they have to try to sort out is the boats that are too close to their area. So every year trying to find out who owns this boat, how to move it out of that area. So if you do have a boat in that area, they would greatly appreciate if you move it before the fireworks, because they can't have it if your boat's there.
Okay, so we are on to item 10A, request Community Futures. Community Futures of Central Kootenay has requested that the city enter into negotiation with KFCK on a cost-sharing agreement to lease space in the Civic Center Arena and/or Curling Club and/or associated facilities in the non-recreational periods to CFCK in order to support the growth of the film industry in Nelson and region. Council is now requested to consider the request. So you have some background there, and there is a staff recommendation with the resolution. Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward.
The council directs staff to enter into negotiations with the Community Futures Central Kootenay on cost-sharing agreement to lease space in the Civic Center Arena and/or Curling Club and/or associated facilities in the non-recreational periods to CFCK in order to support the growth of the film industry in Nelson and the region.
Madam Mayor, can I just?
Yes.
Just on that, I think council's well aware that, we're doing engineered studies on the facilities that they want to utilize. We're also as it said in the report, have this grant to do some design work to accommodate this type of space in the future. So I'm not anticipating that there's anything going to happen there soon. This year it's likely into the future when we get a bit more understanding of those facilities and the potential there. So I have let them know that we at this time with the big projects that we have going on, that's likely not available for this year. This is really looking into the future, and the good news is that Cover was awarded the contract to do the design work for a potential studio and auxiliary space. So that is actively happening now, and I know our facility manager has toured them around, and they're looking at those opportunities, including potentially getting a concrete floor in that building. So that we want to be ready for the capital call here down the road.
Questions, Councillor Payne?
So one of the requests in the immediate term is the scope. So is that something that, how does that happen? Can I understand the process on how we change the scope of that or include something new in the scope? I wasn't familiar with that. So the scope of use for both the Nelson Civic Arena and Nelson Curling Rink be expanded to include?
Yeah, so right now it's a recreation facility. The scope means expand that usage to include potential film uses. That's what's intended by that.
So it's not a bylaw or policy, it's
No,
just we
no.
decide that that's going to be okay with us.
Yeah, you're giving staff direction to
Okay.
go ahead
Okay.
and negotiate something that would allow this other use in that facility in those non-recreation times.
Perfect, thank you. Just wanted to understand.
Councillor Tate?
Thanks very much. I'm aware that this is for the non-recreational times, but I was curious if there had been any engagement with the most frequently used user groups. If there's been an opportunity to reach out to like men's hockey and women's hockey and the minor hockey and those sorts of things, just to make sure that the conversation is open and that they should be watching YouTube, but I don't know that all of those folks are watching YouTube and hearing these conversations, and it'd be great to engage with them. And figure skating, I believe, also uses that space.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. I don't think we've done that directly at this stage. We have certainly, I let the rec commission know that, that we're looking into this, but, and that we're looking at these facilities in terms of, some of the structural challenges that we have in those facilities. So, but yeah, we can ask them to look at that. I think consultation is part of this process, as the grant funding that we got includes that consultation. So
Great.
I think that will be part of it, but I'll just make sure that that's happening.
Thanks. Yeah, I think any kind of conversations with the community really helps boost momentum for positive change.
Good. Any further questions, councillors? So the recommendation before us has been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Thank you, council. Item 10B, the Nelson District Arts Council, mural on city property. The Nelson District Arts Council has requested that council allow a mural to be painted on city-owned property. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned sites for the proposed designs. So you have in front of you the information regarding that, and there's a staff recommendation in front of you, and we should probably do those as separate. So if somebody would like to move resolution number 1, moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Page, and Councillor Lockenberg.
The council approves the use of the retaining wall between the Telus Building, 902 Front Street, and the Capitol Theatre, 421 Victoria Street, for the mural proposed by the Nelson and District Arts Council and designed by artist Anto Otoya.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. As a mover, did you want to speak to it any further? Councillor Lockenberg. Okay, anybody else have any questions or concerns? Councillor Payne.
So the city owns the wall that they would be painting on. Do we need to consult with TELUS because that's their property, the parking lot? Is that the case?
I would say Sydney's, pretty good at making sure she's
Okay.
touching base with the right folks. So, yeah, we would have to be on their property to paint this. And I'm sure she's had that conversation with Telus, but I can reach out to her.
Okay.
Any further questions or concerns, council? Seeing none, all those in favor of the resolution 1? Okay, all in favor, that's
You
carried.
didn't look up at the right moment, everybody.
Sorry, I
had
know,
their
I just
hands
like,
up.
I kinda, it's like, anyone opposed? Okay, and that carries. And the second resolution, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. Councillor Woodward.
The council approves the use of Gyro Park Bathhouse, 212 Gyro Park Road, for the mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by artist Emma Noyes.
Thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Council, is there any further discussion? Boy, you guys are all really quiet tonight. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, councilors. Okay, moving on to 10C, the Nelson District Arts Council mural on city property, not part of Mural Festival. The Nelson District Arts Council has requested the council allow a mural to be painted on city-owned property. This mural is not a part of the annual Mural Festival. Council is now requested to approve or deny the use of the city-owned sites for the proposed designs. So there's a recommendation in front of you. Is there someone that would like to move that? Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Pinero. Councillor Lockenberg.
Is there an update to our agenda?
It's right here. 10C.
10C.
I'm getting to it.
I haven't.
I can read it if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. The council approves the use of the retaining wall at Trafalgar Middle School, lower north and west facing, for the mural proposed by the Nelson District Arts Council and designed by artists Smokey Sumac and Zainab Mohammed.
Sorry, just give me a sec. There's definitely been an earlier version of the agenda. That's what I have.
Okay.
Mine's crashing too, actually,
Okay.
which is weird.
Now it's been moved and seconded.
I don't have a 10C.
Councillor Payne.
I think I saw that they need to consult with SD8. Was that something, or is that done already as well? Blah, blah, blah.
Again, I would say that Cindy Black would have probably touched base with.
Sorry, I thought I read that here, so maybe I'm mistaken then.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's.
So I would imagine that she
Approval
would.
will be sought from SD8 as well as the City of Nelson Council.
Yeah,
In the project plan. So approval will be sought then.
yes,
So
once we
has
approve it
not-
here.
Okay, got it. That's all I wanted clarity on. Thank you.
So everybody clear as mud on that? So once we approve it, Sydney will go to School District 8 to do the final confirmations. So all those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Thank you, council. We have no delegation scheduled for tonight, so moving on to bylaws. Fees and charges amendment, campground, bylaw number 3605. City Campground provides an opportunity for visitors to stay in town at an affordable cost and access the amenities Nelson has to offer on foot, by bicycle, or vehicle. The campground is proposing to increase revenues and modernize some of its policies. Staff research comparable municipal campground fees and charges and policies to address differences and stay competitive. Council is now requested to adopt the fees and charges amendment, Tourist Park Bylaw number 3605, 2024. As you'll recall, council, we did the first 3 readings of this 2 weeks ago? Or last regular meeting? Last regular meeting. So here we are in a position to pass this. So if there's someone that wants to moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Councillor Tate is the mover. Do you have any comments? No. As the seconder, Councillor Lockenberg.
Yep, just that I talked to Sarah earlier about having this come back again next year after we've had a chance to see how it goes and look. I think the comparables are probably something to look at as well, and choose different comparables. So, Squamish, Victoria, as opposed. Thanks.
But the the resolution is that the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3605, 2024 be finally adopted. It's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Fees and Charges Amendment Parkade Bylaw number 3606. With the increase of paving costs, inflation, technology changes, and the need for more transportation infrastructure, staff are recommending an increase to the hourly Parkade rate from $1.50 an hour to $2 an hour to align with on-street parking. Additionally, to maximize the city's current parking assets and encourage use of commuter parking lots, staff are also recommending the removal of monthly Parkade permits. The Fees and Charges Amendment Parkade Fee Bylaw number 3606, 2024 is now presented for adoption. So again, 2 weeks ago, we had a fairly fulsome discussion about these changes to the Parkade fees. And if I could have someone moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. And any discussion, councillors? Councillor Payne.
Is it open 7 days a week, the Parkade?
Yeah.
Okay. And it says we were going to start July 1st, but did we do that? Because we didn't pass it. Okay.
Well, nothing to do with us here, but we're trying to arrange things with our mobile parking vendor, pay by phone. So it's probably just going to take another week or so to just kind of get that locked down. But
okay, so it hasn't increased yet. It will phase in soon.
Councillor Pinero and then Councillor Woodward.
I'm just kind of curious if there was any conversation that I wasn't aware of around maybe offering the Parkade as sort of a different zone so that would maybe reflect what parking rates used to be instead of making it all the same, because and my reasoning for that would be that we want people to actually use it, and it's not something that people have been using, it's not something that people are used to using, and it's much, I think people are very ingrained and used to driving around until they find a spot right in front of where they're going. And it's a different habit. It's a different it's just different behavior to go and park in the Parkade and then walk to where you're going. I think that's what we would want. And I think we would want also people that commute to park there all day as opposed to taking spots on the street, because there's lots of businesses on Baker that you can jump out of your car for 15 minutes, go and get what you need, and go back to your car. And so having that parking spot in front is great. And also just if the point of this is, less driving around and less emissions and whatnot, cruising for spots on Baker for the perfect spot on Baker should be, we want less of that. So I would say, if we can keep the Parkade where the parking rates were 2 weeks ago as an incentive to use it, and make sure that that's full. And then if that's full, it's going to open up a lot of spots on Baker, and then people can pay their premium parking rates on Baker, and that'll be the second line, you know what I mean? So that it just to make sure that we don't end up with this Parkade that's sort of sitting there half empty again, because people aren't used to it, and it's not something that they are habituated to using. It is more of a walk. It is more of like a get out of your car and go to wherever you're going, and I don't think a lot of people are used to that. I know there's some people here that don't drive or whatever, but I think a lot of people do. So just I don't know if anybody thought of that or not, but
or CIO, do you want to answer that?
Well, I think we're confident at this stage that it will be well utilized. The commuter rate is half of what you would pay on the street, because I think it's $8 for the day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's our primary market. So that's what we're hoping to do, and I think we should monitor it. And if it's not, if it's not working, then we'll come back. We're confident at this time with the pay by phone, et cetera, and literally I get the perception of that, but it's literally half a block off Baker Street if you go out the back of the Parkade. So it is very close to, you can't get closer to Baker Street. So we're at adoption now, so I think we should go ahead and see if we can make this work. Believe this is a good solution at this time, and if it's not, and we're not seeing that pickup, then we can always adjust.
Is there other areas that are $5 a day for
Yeah,
commuter
along the side of the
parking?
curling rink.
And Cedar Street, yeah.
And-
And so why is this more expensive?
Well, it's covered, for one thing. It's centrally kind of located there. We're really seeing this as a place for commuters to park, like the CAO was saying, not necessarily for people who are going to duck into the bank or go to a store or anything like that. We had, most of those spots, except for I think a couple of floors at the top, booked out for monthly parkers, and we had people on the waiting list. So the folks we've talked to and letting them know that we're moving to this, who had the reserved parking, their concerns are the other way, that, hey, what if it's full? What if I can't find a place to park? So, I think this is a good price point that kind of makes it fit with the overall parking pricing scheme. And yes, exactly, if we're looking at it and seeing that, hey, this is not being used, then we come and revisit that. But I think, like I say, the concern with, we've gone out to all those folks that were on the waiting list, or a couple dozen of them, saying, hey, this is open now, you can come and park. We want to make sure that it's fully used, but I think we'll see a lot more people parking there just based on that. The folks that use it every day, plus new people who didn't even know it existed, and plus those folks on the waiting list.
If I may, if I may just add, I referenced sort of all the capital projects that we have coming up. The Parkade is an aging piece of infrastructure that requires investment over the next number of years. So there needs to be some consideration given to that that revenue being able to be used to keep that Parkade alive and well in our downtown core. Given that, it seems like it's a pretty good cornerstone of our parking strategy, which the goal is to have more parking turnover on Baker Street. And so that's where, as mentioned, the anticipation of $8 a day parking for commuters. Hopefully all of the employees that previously, many of which I think just accepted the parking ticket that they got each day if they got it and paid the $10 for their daily parking. It'll now be $8 they can park there in a covered stall, leave it there for the day, and then come back. So, but there is consideration with the fees associated with keeping that structure well maintained.
Okay. So, did I get that moved and seconded? Sorry. Okay, the recommendation that the fees and charges amendment, Parkade fees, bylaw number 3606, 2024, be finally adopted. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, and that carries. Councillor Pinero, did you want to vote in opposition?
No.
No. Councillor Payne, you're okay?
Yep.
With the motion?
Page, I was
Page,
for.
sorry.
That's okay.
I just want to make sure he was still with us there for a second, so. Moving on to 12C, Parks Amendment Bylaw number 3607. So staff are recommending an amendment to the Parks Bylaw in order to address camping in city parks and other city-owned green spaces. The bylaw changes seek to balance the constitutional right for individuals to take shelter at night with the broader community's interest to ensure that any such camping is done in an appropriate and non-disruptive manner. Council is now requested to pass first three readings of Parks Amendment number 3607. So you have a backgrounder there, and we have two recommendations that need to be passed separately. Councillor Lockenberg, you want to move the first one?
Sure.
That's seconded by Councillor Woodward. Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Lockenberg as the mover.
That the corporation of the City of Nelson Parks Amendment Bylaw number 3607, 2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Any discussion, council? Councillor Payne, then Councillor Page.
I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding. I did read the whole Parks bylaw and this new amendment. So if I became homeless this week and I have a tent that's 10 by 10, I can, as a resident of Nelson, go and sleep overnight in my 10 by 10 tent in a park as long as I'm out of the park by 9 a.m. Is that what I'm understanding from this?
Sarah Willett, yeah.
As long as those parks are not identified
On the
in
list.
section 5.5. As long as they meet the requirements, which you're right, it's 100 square foot tent.
Yeah, 100 square feet,
Yeah.
whatever.
And it just
dimension
cannot be
your tent is.
identified in, I think it's section 311,
Yeah.
as well as the front lawn of City Hall.
Yeah, and then the next thing I found a little confusing was that section 5.6C, then I would have a place to keep my belongings, including the temporary shelter, in an area not to exceed 36 square feet. So does that mean I can pack everything up and put it neatly there so that I can return the following night to do this all over again? Okay.
But it needs to be packed up.
I get it, yeah, no, that's what I wanted to, so now I take my 10 by 10 shelter and any other belongings that I have, I take the tent down, and I have a 6 by 6 foot area where I don't have to
Is that what
cart
yes.
my belonging, 36 square feet, again, whatever dimension you want. So then I don't have to cart my belongings with me all day long, presuming I feel that they're secure in some way. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that properly.
Well, it says, in a public place as provided for in section 5.5 of this bylaw and must be moved by 9:30 a.m. of the following day.
So then 5.6 section C says I can place or keep all of my belongings, including the temporary shelter.
But you have to read it all in its entirety, right?
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just finding it confusing.
So you can keep, pack the temporary shelter into a bag, pack or other container, and place or
Yes.
keep all of the belongings, including the temporary shelter, into an area which does not exceed 36 square feet. Yes, you are correct.
Okay.
I
But,
believe so.
like right there where my hospital tent was.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's not super clear.
no.
Councillor, you good?
I think I've got it now.
Okay.
So
Councillor,
I'm not trucking everything with me is all I'm saying.
Councillor Page.
Yeah, I was just looking to, for clarity, for readability on 311, add temporary shelters as one of,
No, we looked at that because
Okay.
you did email me about that, and because it is speaking to use of illicit substances, and then section 5.5, I believe, is speaking to, it refers back to section 3.11 as a temporary encampment. But does not, but there's no point, 311 speaks to use of illicit substances, and then lists the parks where you can't, or the public spaces where that's not acceptable.
okay,
And section 5.5 and 5.6 refers back to 311.
oh, it says you just can't do
But-
that, but that else, okay.
Does that sort of clear it up for you? It doesn't make sense to include it in section 311 to refer to encampments or
Temporary shelter.
temporary shelters, because it speaks only to illicit drugs. So in section 5, we're saying it cannot be in any of the places identified in 3.11.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Okay, we did review that though, as
Okay, no,
you
fair
asked
enough.
us to.
I
Yeah.
just want when we go to these sections that,
Yep,
yeah, you get it.
okay. And I think that part is fairly clear.
Okay, yeah, if you're happy with it.
I am.
So there's lots here,
Councilor Pinero.
obviously, but just want to get to the kind of nut of it, sort of on the same vein as Councillor Payne. You are still allowed to camp where you were camping before. You just have to pack up your stuff.
No, you are not. So this is an amendment to the Parks bylaw, which says, as it stands right now, that you cannot camp anywhere
Anywhere.
in a public space.
The current, our
The
current
current-
parks bylaw says you cannot camp anywhere in a public space. We are amending that to allow.
To say where you cannot
Where you can.
set up a
camp.
temporary encampment or temporary shelter.
If you pack it up at the end of the day.
You,
No, both things are true.
but you cannot camp in certain areas, but basically what it's saying is there's a whole lot of other public spaces. There are many other public spaces that are not identified in section 3.11 where you can set up a temporary shelter as long as it is,
10
it
by
follows
10
these
goes
rules.
away at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or at the beginning of the day.
Between 7 PM and 9 AM, I believe it is.
Okay. Okay.
Councillor Lockenberg.
This is not directly related to the bylaw, but more about the enforcement of the bylaw. Do we have a sense, well, and communication. So do we have a sense on how we're going to communicate to the public what their role is in this and what they can expect in terms of enforcement? So for example, if somebody sets up an encampment in one of the not permitted areas, what is the public, what can they expect?
Okay.
And how should they respond if
So
they felt
What
wanted to?
one of the reasons for the amendment is to give our bylaw department some mechanism to move people along. And so it would be the public's responsibility, because we're complaint-based, to register a complaint with the city, goes to our bylaw, and then they can go and check it out. They will be proactive in making sure that people are packed up at 9 AM and that they're moved away by 9:30. Okay, so they'll do that on their own. This bylaw amendment gives them the authority to do so.
Okay. So if I may, I think it would be really helpful to the public for us to have a really good communication
Okay.
around this, so that they, and this is on both sides. So if somebody is feeling like there's somebody violating the bylaw, then they understand what they need to do or can do. And on the other side, to understand that some encampments are totally legal. So back off if you want to call bylaw about something that's actually permitted. So it'd be good to have that clarity to the public as much as possible.
Could I just, have an
Sorry,
example
Councillor
of
Pinero?
a space where that would be allowed?
Dog park,
The dog
Yeah.
park?
like all along there, yeah, as an example.
Okay. And then, just speaking of moving people along, like the public inhabits that during the day.
Yes,
We can't really move people, like they could just stand beside their pile of stuff all day long, could they
as
not?
long as
And-
it's packed up into
Yeah.
a 36 square foot
For sure.
package.
It's packed, but
Yep.
they don't necessarily have to move.
No, their encampment or temporary shelter has to be
Packed
packed
up.
up. Yes,
But we're not moving them along.
no, sorry.
No. Okay, good.
Thank you for clarifying.
Councillor Payne.
That brings me to my next point. Thank you very much for the lead on there. Section 9.7C. So we have moved them along, remove or cause any structure to be moved. And the part that I'm a little confused about is immediately dispose of any item removed under section 9.7A or section 9.7B. So I just want to make sure that that's in alignment with how we would dispose of general property that's located around the city. So a tourist comes, they're sitting at a bench looking at a view, they leave their camera there and they move along. So are we at liberty now to immediately dispose of that property?
No, we're not. We take care of personal property for 30 days.
Okay, so is that what this means?
Does that extend to the homeless?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it
Immediately
does, yeah.
dispose of any property doesn't sound like 30 days to me.
Immediately dispose of any property that is not packed up or so if somebody packed up their stuff and walked away and left it there, we would put it somewhere for 30 days. We would take care of it. If it was just an empty tent and it was in violation of the bylaw, it would go in the garbage.
I don't feel clarity around that. Because when I hear of immediately dispose of any item, it sounds like we pick it up and throw it in the garbage, so.
Councilor Woodward.
I think what the nut of this for me is that we're just trying to protect our city and our citizens just from masses of stuff forming like we've seen around, and so I think it's health and safety, it's cleanliness, and this is an attempt to try to find the balance between public safety, health and safety, community safety, and I think that's where I see it.
Councilor Lockberg.
So for clarity, back to Councillor Payne's point about 9.7.
7:53 p.m.
Just keeping us on track here. So if there's a contravention of another bylaw, let's say somebody has a temporary shelter on their property in contravention of the bylaw, it's tattered and it's scattered onto the neighbor. If bylaw comes and takes that shelter, would it go into the garbage?
If it's in contravention
Yeah. Okay, so we're
of the bylaw.
So what you're saying then is we're providing, or we're applying an even hand of justice here. If we would do the same thing whether they're homeless or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Councilor Payne and then Councilor Page and then Councilor Tate.
I'm on this same topic. Are you on the same topic?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm curious if there is a policy or procedure in place if belongings get left behind at the city campground, and maybe that could be how it's applied.
No.
I think that we don't have a written procedure, but there
Okay.
would be best practices, which would be to store it for 30
30
days
days.
and then make a decision about whether it's garbage or it's garbage, basically.
Okay, I think maybe just double check that, so it's this.
I know,
is it similar?
it's for sure.
Yeah.
We have an unwritten procedure
Okay,
at the campground, and that's what happens.
okay, cool.
One
Okay,
more.
but Councilor Page, are you on the same topic, Councilor Pinero?
Yep.
Okay, Councilor Pinero, are you okay, Councilor Page? Councilor Pinero.
Recovery of said thing. So I just want to, I guess, first of all, the reason for all of this is that health and safety and all those concerns being one thing and even-handedness being another, we are complaints driven, and I guarantee that people complain a lot more about homeless people than they do about people with junk in their yard that own stuff. And so where the rubber hits the road is going to be on homeless people for sure. It's not going to be even-handed because the complaints aren't even-handed. And so I just want to make sure that what we're doing is very clear so that abuses of that system don't become a thing. I think, when you've got people, I know people follow homeless people around with a camera all day long. They follow them around and take pictures of everything they do. You can't say that for most private citizens because that would be harassment. And that's the kind of thing where if our bylaw is responding to complaints, those complaints are going to be 24/7, constantly, all day, because there's people that have that focus, and that's what they want to do with their time. So we need to have, we just need to be very clear, and there seems to be a little muddiness around how this is enacted. And so, you know, and that's my background. And my question is, if somebody did, like if I had a tent and packed it up and it was neatly packed and placed somewhere, and then I went to get something and somebody came and this is an abandoned belongings and we're going to keep it for 30 days. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is this is clearly a homeless person, so I'm just going to throw it in the garbage, which I would hazard is very likely. But best case scenario, we take it for 30 days. It's not tied to any sort of like, I don't have to pay to get my stuff back.
No.
It's not
You would
like
con-
a
you would-
confiscated
Not at
thing.
all.
No.
You would connect with Bylaw, you would call them or email them or stop by or downstairs, and we would connect you with Bylaw, and then you would be either provided your things or you would go with Bylaw to get them.
Okay.
And I just want to follow up that with bylaw, we're not beating them with this stick first. So bylaw is always an educational process. So this bylaw would be no different than any other bylaws that we have in terms of it wouldn't be the end result is the end result. There's always an educational process in a bylaw when you have a first interaction. So this isn't going to be like you violated it, now that's the end of it. I mean, this bylaw process will run out the same way we run all our bylaws. And we also will know who's complaining too. And that carries some merit as to, from the other side. So I think that as much as possible, I think we always do try to have, as Councillor Lockhart says, an even hand, but it's never discipline first and then something else afterwards. It's always an educational process first. Councillor Page, I'm going to let you go because you've now been generous enough to give 2 councillors, and then Councillor Tate.
Most of my questions are, it's really good discussion, so I'm feeling pretty confident about the big ones. One of the other things before we come back for adoption, we use square feet and square meters, and I'm just wondering, do we want to pick a unit of measure?
Yeah.
And the one the country uses?
Or at least have an or maybe? Because
Oh.
it's easier to like understand.
Yeah.
I think it's easier to understand if you put 100 square feet, but then maybe put an or with the, sorry to interrupt, a bracket.
Because tents are still sold as a 10 by 10 tent or 6 by 9 tent or, so.
Yeah,
I
we
agree.
just go between
like
feet and meter. I like both too.
Both.
Okay, so can we just make that amendment? I think that's a friendly amendment for both because I don't work in meters. Sorry,
No, I think that's the most accessible of both. Right? Like that's,
I finished
it's just
school
the
before they
mixing of-
converted.
Yeah, I was going to say they were trying to convert me. I got that one.
Councillor Tate.
I was just going to speak and similar to what you were saying, Mayor, I trust our staff and our bylaws because I know that in the past, likely, we've dealt with other vexatious complainants that may require a thoughtful approach to addressing their complaints. And I think that Nelson City, the people, us, the residents, and who we represent are a caring bunch. And I believe that the employees are as well. And so while we need to have a framework for this, I think we need to trust our staff as well and help educate our citizens. It's what we do. It's what you do really well. I've seen you do it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, obviously there's human rights involved that we have to be very cognizant of. So we're not going to be out enforcing things that aren't going to stand up from a human rights perspective. So we, bylaw will, certainly enforce within, people have the right to shelter and they have the right to overnight shelter and their belongings and the ability to do that. So that's the primary thing. And, it's, yes, if there's a tattered tent or tarp or something like that that's clearly been discarded, then that stuff will probably end up in the garbage. If it's someone's packed it up in a backpack that clearly looks like, someone's, belongings, and not gonna just throw that in the garbage.
Can I also, I just want to add, I know you don't need a bylaw to build strong relationships, but it really helps give our bylaw sort of a tool for approaching people and keeping the lines of communication open. And like, I don't know if anyone saw how bylaw engaged with the folks that were outside of City Hall, but it was fairly heartwarming. And maybe they couldn't stay outside, they could not stay outside, but bylaw worked very closely with them. It wasn't just a one-time, like, you're out of here thing. It was months of communicating and speaking with these people and trying to provide some education and answering their questions and talking to them about their stuff, because that's really important to them. And so this just keeps that relationship going. It kind of carries it on, and I think that's it's really important.
May I?
Sure.
I just want to make a point that I'm not calling into question our staff's ability to carry out these things. I think what I'm more just cautioning us is that what we draft as a bylaw or as guidelines or rules are very clear, so that both the staff knows what they're capable of and or the parameters that they're working under, and also the complainants know the parameters that we're working under, because I think that's more where I have less confidence, honestly. And then also people that are sort of at the business end of those bylaws also know what, they need to know the parameters as well, so that they can, be in compliance with them. So just the clearer the language, the better, I guess, is all I was trying to say.
So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe if we have the opportunity to bring it back for adoption, we also attach some procedures. So it's not part of the bylaw, but the procedures make it very clear for everyone involved, whether it's council, me, bylaw, the public, whoever. But it's very clearly laid out how we would address some of the infractions or not address them, and how you can go about complaining or not complaining or whatever.
I would appreciate that. I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
So, and procedures don't need to be passed by council, but I think that just in terms of this bylaw, so that we know what the workings are. So, Councillor Payne was next, and then Councillor Lockenberg.
Great conversation. I just feel that we've clarified quite a few things, but I want to make sure that's reflected in the bylaw. So for me, removing the word immediately would be less abrupt. Actually, the word violent comes to me because I'm trying to think of being in that situation where you're threatening where my possessions are threatened. So we can say dispose of any other items, and then if we could put something about the 30 days in there as per best practices at the campground, or whatever you want to say, then any citizen who is walking around with a camera and who comes to read this will have a much clearer understanding of how this is going to be dealt with without having to. I think the procedure is a great idea, but I don't understand why it couldn't be reflected in this document. But
I think the key part of this is may in that bylaw, right?
Is immediate?
Is may.
Is may.
Oh, may.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you read 9.7, it says may do all those things, so it doesn't say they will. So that's where the discretion is. I get that, defining this as much as possible would be great, but on the other hand, it's hard to define that. Like, how do you start to define this as, this is, could be removed, this couldn't, like, it's really the person stuff that probably dictates that more than anything. So I would actually suggest that, the may gives our bylaw officers the ability to work with folks and the ability to do this. And I think I agree on the communication side that we need to be clear to the public. This isn't, we're not running around removing people's personal stuff unless it's clearly been abandoned or we've said, look, you need to clean this up, and you just haven't been able to do that. And so I think, as Sarah said, the work we did out here, I think we found a good place. I've talked to other CAOs in our neighboring communities. They have similar bylaws. They're enforcing it in the same way, and it has allowed them to work with folks. And I think our bylaw are compassionate to the folks out there, and I think that's the biggest message to the community, that this is not meant to take people's personal possessions or any of that. This is to to work with people.
I just had a quick comment that could be generalized and in our approach, which is that we've had so many emails from concerned people about the shelters and so on. Could we just export all those emails, grab every email of every person who's emailed us, simple macro maybe, and then just send it to them? Because if we're going to have complaints, there's a really good chance it's going to be from one of those people, and just directly message to them, here's the new bylaw, and here's, if you want to make it a complaint in the future, here's, here it is.
I totally appreciate that. We have some privacy issues with that, but I think that we can make sure that it is spread far and wide and communicated far and wide without having to do direct. We can't do that.
The direct mail out. Oh, okay. So councillors, I'm seeing no further discussion at the moment. We have the recommendation number 1, the reading of this bylaw for the first and second time by title only, in front of us. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor and those opposed, and that carries. Thank you, councillors. We have a second recommendation before us, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Parks Amendment Bylaw number 3607, 2024 be read a third time by title only.
Any further discussion, councillors?
I just would like to say I appreciate the hard work that the staff here has tried to find a balance between people in need, community safety, our bylaw officers, our police. Our emergency services, it's a huge undertaking to try to find the balance here. I was really appreciative of this amendment, and it gives just more tools in the tool belt for us to work with these issues. So I just want to say I thank you to staff for putting in the time to craft this.
Thank you, Councillor Woodward. Okay, so all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, everybody. And now we're on to the Hydro Services Bylaw number 3608. The City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw 3196, which serves as the Nelson Hydro Terms of Conditions and Service, was last revised in 2012. Since that time, technology, terminology, and industry best practices have evolved, and the bylaw needs to be modernized. Nelson Hydro staff has undergone a thorough review of the terms and conditions to update, reorganize, and reformat the bylaw with the intent of making it easier for staff and customers to use. Staff are now requesting that council provide first 3 readings of the new bylaw and approve submission of the bylaw to the BCUC's, my favorite corporation, BCUC, for approval in advance of adoption. So we have a number of resolutions there that we need to pass separately. You've got a backgrounder there. We have, Scott, if you want to come up just in case there are any further questions. We have the Executive Director for Hydro, the General Manager of Hydro, with us this evening. As you know, we had a workshop on these bylaw changes last week. There was the opportunity for the public to come into City Council chambers to hear what we had heard the previous week and to ask any questions about these changes going forward. And of course, this is before us now because it takes a long time to get things through BCUC. So, anybody want to move the first recommendation? Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Woodward. Councillor Tate.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Hydro Services Bylaw number 3608/2024 be introduced and read for a first and second time by title only.
Okay, councillors, any questions? Manager, would you like to say anything? So, Councillor Tate's got a question probably for you already.
No, I really appreciated the format here of the concern and how you responded to that. Out of curiosity, you've told us the response. Have you told the person who put in the inquiry the response as well? Did they give their contact information with their concern?
Yes, everyone that participated registered for participating in the public consultation or reached out to us and provided their contact information.
Okay.
And all of these recommendations were sent to everyone who registered, not necessarily just those who participated in the in-person or online or the hybrid consultation process.
Okay, thanks.
This does have to go to the Utility Commission, so they will have a chance to comment before
Again.
the Utility Commission again, so.
Yeah. Anybody else have any? Just the Utilities Commission. They're some of Nelson's favorite people at the Utilities Commission. Any further comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Page.
Just because we're here moving third and second, I'm just going to state again that I think the tenant security deposit component is not strong. Well, it's overly burdensome on the tenant. I've said it before. I think it needs to be considered of people's credit history. I think there needs to be flexibility. I think the principle of only property owners can waive the security deposit, even if you've been a customer in good standing for decades, is just not where to draw the line. And so I'm opposed to it, but I've said that before, so.
Maybe I can ask, did we consider if the landlord agreed that the security deposit could be waived? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. The bylaw reads that the landlord may provide a letter in writing to Nelson Hydro and City of Nelson that they would take responsibility for the debt if it was passed on. But here, Councillor Page's concerns, we did consider this quite carefully. We were finding it very challenging to administer. Who had a security deposit, who didn't have a security deposit, and the original bylaw also had an expiration date for the security deposit, so we would have to return that security deposit after they had developed that credit history, which we found very burdensome to try and fairly track. This way, it's easy, straight across the board, and is a very common utility practice.
Anything further, Councillor Page? Councillor Pinero.
Really digging deep into the memory here, so potentially it's not real.
Of course it's real. It's your memory.
But was there ever a time when it was just I'm just trying to remember, I moved here when I was 15 years old and began renting houses, basically. And I seem to remember that if you were a first-time Nelson Hydro customer, that was it. You had a security deposit, and if you had sort of safely surpassed that milestone, and this was your third time having an account or what have you, then and you didn't have there was no deposit. Am I making that up? Or if I'm not making it up, or even if I am, I suppose, is that not a fairly clear line and a fairly easy way to administer it? Like if it's your first time and we have no idea who you are, we need a security deposit. And if you lived here for 15 years in 5 different houses and there's no outstanding issues, then there's no need for one.
Yes, you're correct, Councillor Page. Councillor Pinero. The bylaw, the 2012 bylaw 3196 states that if the City of Nelson deems you have sufficient credit history and specifically references, experience with either Nelson Hydro or a previous utility payments, that the security deposit would be waived. We have found that that wasn't necessarily a good criterion upon which to base that decision, because people who've paid over time may have some situation changed and then they weren't able to pay, and consequently we had no way to recover any of those funds. So the security deposit is a way that we are able to safeguard the rest of the ratepayers from absorbing fees, overdue or unpaid fees.
Councillor Tate.
I have a question. Is it the case that even with a security deposit and a tenant moves out, doesn't pay their last bill, the security deposit covers a portion of the last bill, that the remaining portion is then transferred to the owner?
So the process as laid out in the current version of the bylaw 3608, sorry, the new bylaw 3608 is as follows. So if someone is moving out and they have not paid their final bill, then the security deposit will be used to net that out. If there is still a balance owing, then we will do our best to contact the tenant or the account holder to recover those funds. If we're unsuccessful, then we will commission a collection agency to attempt to secure those funds. After those efforts have been exhausted, at the end of the fiscal year, December 31st, if they remain unpaid, then they are transferred to taxes of the owner of the property. That is correct.
So the ratepayer is always protected.
Correct.
Councillor Tate, further question there?
I'm just ruminating on the fact that a landlord will collect a damage deposit and could potentially use that to offset any remaining portion. But if it goes to the end of the fiscal, they may have already returned that. So my wheels were just turning there on the timeline and fairness and just trying to sort it all out. Mm-hmm. That was my face.
So, Scott, when would we inform the landlord that there's outstanding?
So as soon as there's an outstanding amount owed, a landlord is given the notice. Most landlords, or many landlords, have a note on file that any time that there is an outstanding account or a past due bill, that they be notified, to give them a chance at any time throughout the tenancy to be able to pursue that.
So they should know when the person's moving out that there's outstanding hydro amounts owed. So I think if they have a damage deposit, they should be able to hold back that unpaid account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like Nelson Hydro tries to collect the funds from either the tenant, which is the account holder, or the property owner, depending on the remaining account balance. Interesting.
And Scott, can I just add, and you can add to this as well if you like, that another alternative is that the landlord could keep the account in their own name and have the ability to sort of manage it that way and bill their tenant subsequent to that.
Yeah, that is an option for landlords as well if they are concerned about a tenant's ability to make the payments and or collect. Then they can keep the utilities in their own name and maintain full control over that account and collect directly if that works better for them.
And do I understand correctly that the security deposit could, if you pay your last bill, the security deposit could move to your new address? As a tenant, if you change from one address to another and you've closed out your account at a particular address, does your original security deposit transfer to your new address?
It wouldn't automatically, but if you request it, like if as you're closing one account and opening another account, then I'm fairly certain that is a possibility. I don't think we need to refund you and then recollect it again. I believe we can transfer.
So in that case, it kind of does what Councillor Pinheiro said, which is and you only pay the security deposit sort of once, because then it could potentially follow you to a new address.
Yeah, the nuance there is that when someone moves out, we take a meter reading as close as we can to the date of move out, and then there's a bill that's generated, and that will be due at least 30 days from the date of move out. So if someone chooses not to pay that, then it can stretch out. So there is in terms of the security deposit, you need to, you can transfer the security deposit, but overdue amounts are harder to follow if there is an overdue amount, and we won't know that until 30 days later. So if it's an owner, we can transfer the debt from one property to another, but for a tenant we cannot. Because if we did that, then the owner of the new property could assume the debt that was incurred on another property, which would not be fair.
There's some complexity there.
Councillor Payne.
I must have heard the answer to
Okay.
my question
Okay.
in this, so thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further questions or comments, the resolution number 1 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor and opposed? Do you wish to be recorded, Councillor Page?
No.
Okay, and that carries. Recommendation number 2, Councillor Woodward, seconded Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Hydro Service Bylaw number 3608, 2024 be read for a third time by title only.
Okay, councillors, I don't think there's anything new to add to the discussion, so I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Recommendation resolution number 3. Councillor Tate, seconder, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Tate.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3609, 2024 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the fees and charges amendments? Seeing nobody jumping up on that one, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that carries. And recommendation resolution number 4.
Move.
Councillor Woodward, seconded. Councillor Tate, Councillor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 3609, 2024 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And seeing no discussion, all those in favor, and that carries. So there we go. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, Scott, for coming to attend tonight to answer any last questions. And now I guess we'll wait to see what happens with BCUC. So they have to rule, and they might have suggestions of changes or whatever. Maybe you could just tell us, because then if they give it the 2 thumbs up, it comes back, we do final reading, we give it to them, they have questions, we might be coming back. Would we be coming back to do second and third readings again because of changes, or?
I don't know if I can answer that. Perhaps that's a question for the corporate officer, but I can tell you the process. So the Utilities Commission expects us to file a proceeding to review the terms and conditions of service. So we are hoping to file that in the next few weeks. Once that goes to the commission, they will determine a timeline and assign a panel and determine sort of the extent to the proceeding. So we don't know sort of exactly what they're going to ask for. It's possible that they probable that they will be looking for input either through letters of comment or from comments from interveners, as well as questions from their staff about our bylaws. Once we have gone through 1, 2, or 3 rounds of information requests from the Utilities Commission, then the panel will review and make their decision. And once they provide that, that's where we would learn if there are any amendments that they have requested. If there are amendments, we will make those changes in the bylaw as a compliance filing for the Utilities Commission, but then it would have to come back to council here, and I don't know exactly if you have to sort of go through the whole, if we make any changes at all, or
Yeah,
if
we
it's
do.
minor, or I don't know.
We can make sort of spelling and numbering changes, but if there's any amendments from the BCUC, we have to go back, repeal third reading,
Okay, thank you.
make the amendments, adopt, or give it third reading and then send it. It's, yeah.
Yeah, so there may be an opportunity for council to ask questions about any of the amendments or anything that needs to change.
Right, because you're going to probably be
one more
back
time.
visiting us again then.
We will definitely be back.
So then my next question would be is that this is July. We know that our procedure for hydro rates for 2025, we will be doing that work in late September, early October. So this could still be sitting at BCUC. So we would, in the interim, still use the 2012 bylaw. So the 2012 bylaw is the bylaw that's in effect. We could be doing our next rate adjustments or recommendations for the 2025 budget based on the old bylaw.
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
So the 3196 2012 bylaw will be in effect until this one comes into effect. We have asked in our application for the proceeding that these would be effective the 1st of January 2025, but we would likely, if it looked like the proceeding was going to take longer, we would have to make a decision as to whether we wanted to ask for interim approval or whether we wanted to just delay the actual, effective date of the bylaws. At this point, I don't know until we actually have a sense for what that proceeding looks like and how long it's going to take. It was our hope that we have a bit of a gap here between, we've just received approval for our 2023 revenue requirements, our 2025 and perhaps multi-year revenue requirements would be submitted by the end of October. So we're hoping that we can use this time in between to work with the BCUC to, at the very least, get through sort of, the information requests and get all the information that they have and let them decide ideally before the 1st of January 2025. But sometimes you just have to be patient with the Utilities Commission because their processes do take time.
Thank you for that.
Just to clarify, it was 2024 we finally got approval.
Sorry.
You said 2023, it's okay.
Sorry, yes, 2024 is.
Yeah, just glad. So we're halfway through the year and we just got that one, so.
Yes.
Anyways, well, I can tell you, speaking for myself, but I think on behalf of all of council, we really appreciate all the work that you do here. This is a diamond for the city of Nelson to have this utility. And I know that I'm looking forward to the fall for the updates because your team deliver fantastic updates on all of the generation, distribution, transmission. And, as we move further into the all-electric world, getting updates on new technology and making sure that we're ready to take on the demand and needs in our area is always an exciting discussion around the table. So looking forward to having you back in the fall.
Thank you.
Scott. Okay, moving on. We have no recommendations from staff and we're at agenda item number 14. And so we have some minutes in front of us. So for information, we have the NAEDP Advisory Committee, the Cultural Development Committee, and the Public Library Board. Does anybody want to pull one of those out separately, or I can ask for Councillor Payne?
I'm interested to understand the procedure on this because the NAEDP report, as interesting as it was, being from March 13th, and in that meeting, they were talking about things that were going to be happening in April, and now we're at July. So is there a way that we could expedite it so it would seem more relevant, or is there a way for me to get that?
That's their board sending us the minutes.
Okay,
but
so that's
Councillor,
what it is.
It's not our board, right?
No,
So
that's what I'm trying to understand. So
Yeah.
it's from the NAEDP,
Yeah.
just not sending them until now.
Councillor
That's what I
Page.
wanted.
A step in front of Kate, who's on the advisory committee, but those reports specifically are the advisory reports, and they met again, they meet quarterly, so they've adopted their minutes.
So that's what I
That's why
wondered.
you're seeing them,
Yeah.
because they adopted them in May.
Just, yeah,
Or
last
June,
month.
or what, yeah, just last month.
That's the procedural part that I wanted to understand. So it's
Yeah,
quarterly.
they've got to see them first from the March, then they approve them, then they send them to us.
There's the two. There's
Yeah.
the partnership something
Yeah, I
and the
know.
advisory
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, the coordinating committee meets monthly in between.
The coordinating committee was, yeah, and they were talking about certain things happening at the coordinating committee, and we get those minutes as well, do we?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, there were just a few things in there that I was quite interested in, so I'm just waiting for the next chapter now.
3 months.
Well, if it was in
You'll find out
March,
what happened in
if it's
June.
in March, we should have it. Oh, but you mean if the meeting was in June, we're not gonna get, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so the June meeting, you're not gonna see till the fall at this point, so.
I'll move this item.
Okay, so nobody else had anything they wanted to pull out. So, okay, in total, then we're moving items 1, 2, and 3 for receipt for information. It's been moved by Councillor Woodward, seconder. Councillor Page. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, council. And then we have items, finance and development services in reports. Is there anybody there that sees anything that they wanted to pull out or have questions for, or else we can receive these for information as 2 items together?
I'll move.
Thank you.
I would just kind of say something? I would just say when you look at the March payment and the April payment to Fortis, energy efficiency is a good thing. If we can become more energy efficient, we could pay less to Fortis. So, just those are big numbers.
And that reflects the total, that's our distribution grid.
Yes.
That's what we're buying for the city and the north and south shore, so.
sure.
Yeah, so everybody has to get in, including those that live in the regional district, for trying to conserve as much as possible or become as efficient as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded.
Oh, sorry, I don't have the second yet.
Oh, it was, I think it was, well, we'll go with Tate this time, but I think it was Page, sorry. And all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you, council. There's no notice of motions, no late items, and so if I could request. Oh, sorry, that's what I'm missing here. Yeah, sorry. I need a motion to go in camera.
Move.
Seconder. Okay, moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Page. And I don't have the
I can do it.
legislative.
I can do it. I got it here, I think, don't I?
Do you have it?
That it is the opinion of the council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the meeting of council continue under section 91.
Thank you.
Something.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and I can have a mover. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor? And that carries. Okay, just while we change things over, okay? Yep, just while we change things over, let's take 5 minutes.